The woman who traded freedom for war. Elena Caruso stood at the edge of her own engagement party, champagne glass trembling in her hand, watching the man she secretly loved laugh with the mobsters who'd built an empire on blood and silence. Nico Valenti, heir to the most dangerous crime family in Chicago, had spent 3 years treating her like expensive furniture. Tonight, she was supposed to smile through toast celebrating her hollow engagement to an ambitious fraud. Instead, she was about to run. What she didn't know, her fiancé had already sold her out to their enemies. The elevator she was sneaking toward held the one man who could destroy her carefully planned escape, and the next 2 hours would shatter everything she thought she knew about power, protection, and the devastating cost of being loved by a man who'd built walls around his heart with the bodies of his enemies. If you want to see how a woman turned a crime lord's cold calculation into her greatest weapon, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Caruso mansion glittered like a diamond choking on its own brilliance. Elena stood near the marble balustrade overlooking the grand ballroom, her engagement ring catching the light from 3 crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. 200 guests filled the space below, soldiers in expensive suits, their wives draped in jewelry that whispered of protection money and import schemes. Politicians who'd learned to smile while swallowing their principles. The orchestra played something classical and forgettable. Waiters circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than the minimum wage workers who'd prepared the catering would see in a month. Her fiancé, Gavin Hale, worked the room like a man running for office. Tall, handsome in that practiced way that photographs well, his smile calibrated to suggest warmth without promising anything real. He'd positioned himself near Antonio Caruso, her father, laughing at something one of the underbosses said. Playing the role. Ambitious son-in-law, future asset to the family, man who'd elevate the Caruso name through legitimate business connections. All of it performance, all of it lies. Elena had known for 6 weeks. The relationship had been dying for months before that, slow suffocation dressed up as partnership. But 6 weeks ago, she'd walked into his apartment unannounced and found financial records he'd been careless enough to leave visible on his laptop screen. Numbers that didn't match his supposed consulting income. Transfers that created patterns. Meeting notes referencing names she recognized from her father's carefully casual dinner table conversations about territorial disputes and supply chain complications. She hadn't confronted him. She'd smiled, apologized for the intrusion, let him kiss her cheek and promised dinner next week. Then she'd gone home and started planning her exit with the methodical precision her father had tried to teach her to apply to flower arrangements and charity galas instead of escape routes. Boston. Clean break. New identity, new life, new everything. She had money saved in accounts Gavin didn't know about, documentation her father's people could never trace, contacts in Massachusetts who owed her favors that had nothing to do with the Caruso name. 3 months of planning. Tickets purchased under a borrowed identity, apartments secured through intermediaries, job opportunity that would give her legitimate income and the chance to build something that belonged only to her. Tonight was supposed to be her last performance. Smile through the toasts. Accept congratulations. Play the role of the dutiful daughter one final time. Then slip away while everyone was drunk and distracted, catch a car to the airport, and vanish into a future that didn't include blood money or men who treated love like a hostile takeover. She checked her watch, 11:30. Her flight left at 2:15. The car was waiting 3 blocks away. Driver paid in cash. Instructions clear. She had 90 minutes to disappear. The private elevator at the east end of the mansion would take her directly to the underground garage. From there, service exit, side street, freedom. She'd mapped it a dozen times, timed it, rehearsed her exit until she could do it in her sleep. Elena set her champagne glass on a passing waiter's tray and moved along the balcony with the unhurried grace of someone simply stepping away for air. Below, Gavin continued his performance. Her father held court near the bar. Her mother, elegant, detached, medicated into permanent serenity, drifted between conversation clusters like expensive smoke. No one watched Elena leave. She'd spent her entire life being overlooked. The hallway beyond the balcony stretched long and quiet, the party noise fading behind thick doors and old money. Her heels clicked against Italian marble. She'd chosen the dress carefully. Beautiful enough not to raise questions, practical enough to move in. Midnight blue silk that caught light like water. No train, no elaborate structure. Easy to pack, easier to abandon. The elevator waited at the end of the hall like a promise. Private access, keycard restricted, reserved for family and the highest-ranking members of her father's organization. Elena had lifted her father's secondary card 3 weeks ago. He'd never noticed. Men like Antonio Caruso never imagined their daughters might need escape routes. She pulled the card from her clutch, hand steady despite her racing heart. Swiped it through the reader. The lock disengaged with a soft click that sounded like liberation. The doors slid open. Nico Valenti leaned against the elevator's back wall, arms crossed, wearing a tuxedo like other men wore weapons. Elena's breath stopped. She'd spent 3 years training herself not to react to him. 3 years learning to keep her face blank when he entered a room, to maintain casual distance when family gatherings forced them into proximity, to kill the hope that flickered stupidly alive whenever his dark eyes swept past her like she was furniture that didn't quite match the decor. Nico Valenti, heir to the Valenti Empire, which made the Caruso operation look like a corner store franchise. 29 years old and already legendary for the kind of cold strategic brilliance that turned territorial disputes into annexations and rival families into cautionary tales. Tall enough to make doorways look small. Built like someone who'd learned to fight before he'd learned to read. Black hair kept short, sharp features that photographs never quite captured, eyes that saw everything and promised nothing. Her father's most powerful ally. The man who'd brokered peace treaties that held because people feared what would happen if they broke them. The reason the Caruso family had survived the consolidation wars that had destroyed a dozen other operations. The man Elena had been stupid enough to fall in love with when she was 19 and too young to understand that some people were built without the architecture for love. He'd never touched her, barely spoke to her, treated her with the distant courtesy men like him reserved for irrelevant accessories to necessary business relationships. 3 years of family dinners where he discussed strategy with her father and looked through her like glass. 3 years of watching him move through rooms full of dangerous people who stepped aside because survival instincts overrode pride. 3 years of teaching herself that the acute awareness she felt whenever he was near meant nothing, changed nothing, mattered to no one but her. Going somewhere? His voice was dark whiskey and cigarette smoke, the kind of sound that made bad decisions feel like strategic victories. Elena's fingers tightened on her clutch. The elevator doors waited, open, patient. She could back away. Apologize. Claim she'd pressed the button by mistake. Retreat to the party and find another exit, but she'd spent her whole life retreating. Boston. The word came out steady. Small victory. 2:15 flight. Cars waiting. You can either get out of my way or explain to my father why you helped his daughter disappear. Something flickered in Nico's eyes. Not surprise. Interest, maybe. The kind of attention a predator shows when prey does something unexpected. Your father thinks you're upstairs celebrating your engagement. He didn't move from the elevator wall. Gavin's downstairs accepting congratulations. Talking about wedding venues and merger opportunities. Playing his part. Gavin's always been good at playing parts. Elena stepped into the elevator despite every instinct screaming warnings. The doors slid shut behind her with a whisper of finality. Small space suddenly smaller. That's why I'm leaving before I have to watch him play husband. Smart. Nico studied her with the clinical precision he probably used when evaluating business acquisitions. Except you're not leaving. Elena's spine straightened. You don't give me orders. No. He pushed off the wall, moved closer. Not threatening, just present, just impossible to ignore. But I'm giving you information. Your escape plan? Already compromised. That driver waiting 3 blocks away? He's on Gavin's payroll. The Boston apartment? Your fiancé knows about it. Has for 2 weeks. The elevator seemed to tilt. Elena pressed her palm against the wall, fighting for balance that had nothing to do with the floor beneath her feet. You're lying. I don't lie about business. Nico's voice stayed level, professional, like he was discussing shipping manifests instead of destroying her carefully constructed future. And you stopped being personal the moment you became operational risk. Operational risk. The words tasted like poison. That's what I am to you? A liability in an expensive dress? You're Antonio Caruso's daughter. You're engaged to a man who's been stealing from your family and selling information to the Constantine brothers. Your leverage, currency, a weakness in the defensive perimeter. He said it without inflection, stating facts. The moment you try to run, you become a target. The moment you become a target, you become everyone's problem. Elena's laugh came out sharp and bitter. So I should just stay? Smile through a marriage to a traitor because leaving would be inconvenient for the organization? You should stay because leaving gets you killed. Nico's jaw tightened. First sign of actual emotion. Gavin's been meeting with Constantine's people for 3 months, selling them shipment schedules, security protocols, family information. They're planning something, using him as their inside access. And you? His eyes locked on hers. You're his insurance policy, the good faith gesture that proves he's committed to betraying your father. The elevator's fluorescent light suddenly felt too bright. Elena's chest constricted. You're saying if I run, he delivers you to them. They use you for leverage against Antonio. Your father pays whatever they demand, or they send pieces of you back until he complies. Nico's voice dropped lower, harder. Then they kill you anyway, because that's how the Constantine brothers negotiate. Silence filled the elevator like water rising. Elena forced herself to breathe. How long have you known? 6 weeks. He didn't apologize. We've been watching Gavin, building the case, tracking his meetings, documenting everything, waiting for him to lead us to the full network before we move. 6 weeks. Her voice came out flat, dead. You've known for 6 weeks that I was engaged to a traitor, and you said nothing. I said nothing because telling you would have changed your behavior, changed how you interacted with him, might have tipped him off that we knew. Nico's expression remained carved from stone. Your safety required you staying ignorant. My safety? Elena stepped forward, close enough to see the faint scar along his jawline, the one he'd supposedly gotten in a knife fight when he was 17. You kept me in the dark about the man I was sleeping next to. Let me plan a future with someone who was plotting to hand me over to people who traffic in body parts, all for operational security. Yes, no hesitation, no regret. Because operational security keeps you breathing. Her hand moved before conscious thought. The slap cracked across his face with enough force to snap his head sideways. She expected retaliation. These men didn't accept challenges to their authority. She'd seen her father break bones for less disrespect. But Nico just straightened slowly, working his jaw, a red mark blooming across his cheek. When he looked at her again, something dangerous burned in his eyes. Feel better? His voice stayed quiet, controlled, more frightening than shouting. Not even slightly. Elena's hand throbbed. Worth it. You want to know what would make me feel better? You treating me like a person instead of a chess piece. You asking instead of deciding. You giving me the information I needed to make my own choices instead of managing me like I'm some fragile thing that might break if I know the truth. You want the truth? Nico moved closer, crowded her against the elevator wall. Not touching, just present, just overwhelming. Fine. Here's truth. I've spent 3 years staying away from you because you're the one thing in this entire goddamn city that could make me lose control. You walk into a room and I have to remind myself why I can't have you. Every family dinner, every party, every time your father seats you across from me like he doesn't notice how I stop hearing conversations when you laugh. Elena's breath caught. What? You think I don't see you? His voice dropped to something rough, raw. You think I've been looking through you? I've been looking everywhere except at you because the alternative is everyone in the organization noticing that Antonio Caruso's daughter is the only thing I want that I haven't taken. The elevator walls seemed to close in. Elena's pulse hammered against her throat. You never said, because saying it changes everything. Makes you vulnerable. Puts a target on you that's bigger than anything Gavin's stupidity could create. His hand rose, stopped inches from her face, close enough to feel the heat, not close enough to touch. The Constantine brothers aren't the only people who'd use you against me if they knew. Every rival, every ambitious soldier, every enemy we've made. They'd all line up for the chance to hurt you and watch me burn the city down in response. So you stayed away. Her voice came out barely above whisper. So I stayed away. His hand dropped. Built walls, kept distance, treated you like you didn't matter, because keeping you safe required making everyone believe you didn't. And now? Elena couldn't look away from his eyes. Dark, intense, nothing cold about them anymore. Now Gavin's already made you a target. Now the protection of distance doesn't work anymore. Nico's jaw clenched. Now we do this the hard way. The elevator chimed. Doors slid open onto the underground garage. 3 men in dark suits waited outside. Valenti soldiers. Elena recognized Marco, Nico's head of security. Built like a tank, face like a war memorial. The other 2 were younger, just as dangerous. Sir? Marco's eyes flicked to Elena, back to Nico. Mr. Caruso's asking for his daughter. Gavin's getting nervous. Tell Antonio she's fine. Tell him I need to speak with him privately, immediately. Nico's voice shifted back to command mode. Emotion locked away. Move the primary security detail to elevated alert. I want eyes on Gavin every second. And get Elena somewhere secure. I'm not a package you can store. Elena stepped forward. If we're having this conversation, we're having all of it. I want to know everything about Gavin, everything about the Constantine brothers, everything about what you've been planning. Nico looked at her like he was seeing someone new. You want in? I want agency. Elena held his stare. You said I'm operational risk? Fine. Make me operational asset instead. I know Gavin better than anyone. I know his patterns, his tells, his weaknesses. You want to take him down? Use me. Marco cleared his throat. Sir, that's dangerous, reckless, against protocol. Nico finished. I know. He studied Elena with that calculating expression that made smart people nervous. You understand what you're offering. This isn't playing detective. This is putting yourself in the line of fire. If Gavin suspects you know, if the Constantine brothers think you're working against them, they won't hesitate. They were already planning to use me as leverage. Elena's voice stayed steady, strong. At least this way I'm choosing the fight instead of just being the prize. Silence stretched between them. The garage hummed with mechanical sounds. Distant party noise filtered through walls and floors. Finally, Nico nodded. Marco, conference room. Get Antonio in the inner circle. Tell them it's critical, and get someone to cover for Elena at the party. Tell them she's not feeling well. On it. Marco pulled out his phone, already moving. Nico turned back to Elena. This gets complicated fast. You're about to see parts of your father's organization that he's spent your whole life keeping you away from. You're about to learn things that you can't unlearn. You sure you want this? Elena thought about Boston, clean break, new life, freedom that came from running. Then she thought about Gavin selling her out, about the Constantine brothers planning to use her like currency, about spending her whole life being managed and protected and kept ignorant for her own good. I'm sure. She stepped out of the elevator. Show me the war room. Tat. The conference room occupied the mansion's subterranean level, a space that didn't appear on any official blueprints. Elena had known it existed the way children know about adult secrets, through careful observation and intelligent extrapolation. But she'd never been inside. Nico led her through corridors that smelled like concrete and gun oil. The party noise disappeared completely. Down here, the mansion's elegant facade gave way to pure function. Reinforced walls, security doors, surveillance monitors showing every approach. They passed rooms whose purposes Elena could only guess. Armory, communication center, holding cells maybe. The infrastructure of an empire built on violence and control. The conference room's door required biometric access. Nico pressed his palm to the reader. The lock disengaged with a heavy thunk. Inside, the space looked like a corporate boardroom designed by people who'd watched too many military thrillers. Long table, leather chairs, wall screens showing maps, surveillance feeds, data readouts, everything state-of-the-art, everything serious. Her father was already there, standing near the head of the table, face carved from stone. Antonio Caruso at 60 looked like a man who'd built his empire through strategic brutality and never apologized. Gray hair, sharp suit, eyes that had watched people die and slept fine afterward. Three other men occupied chairs around the table. Vincent DeLuca, her father's consigliere, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the man who turned violence into legal strategy. James Chen, head of operations, responsible for the logistics that kept money flowing and witnesses quiet. And Michael Caruso, her uncle, her father's younger brother, who handled enforcement with the kind of efficiency that kept people obedient. All of them looked at Elena like she was a bomb that had just been discovered ticking in the basement. "What the hell is this?" Antonio's voice came out flat. "Dangerous. Nico, I asked for a private meeting about the Constantine situation, not a family reunion. She's part of the situation." Nico moved to the table, gestured for Elena to take a seat. "She has a right to know. She has a right to stay safe." Antonio's jaw clenched. "Which means staying upstairs, playing her part, not getting involved in the fact that my fiancé's been selling you out to your enemies?" Elena cut in. All heads turned toward her. "Or the part where he was planning to hand me over as a bargaining chip? Which part exactly should I stay ignorant about, Dad?" The silence that followed could have frozen blood. Vincent broke it first. "She knows?" He looked at Nico. "You told her?" "I caught her trying to run." Nico pulled out a chair. She'd planned an exit. Boston, new identity, clean break, would have walked straight into Gavin's trap if I hadn't intercepted. Jesus Christ, Antonio's hand slammed down on the table. "You were leaving? Tonight? Without telling anyone?" "I was leaving a relationship with a man I don't love to start a life that actually belongs to me." Elena faced her father's anger without flinching. "Would you have let me go if I'd asked permission?" "Of course not. You're..." "Exactly." Elena sat down at the table. "Uninvited, unwelcome, not leaving." "So I stopped asking, and now that I know what Gavin's actually planning, I'm offering to help you take him down. Unless you'd prefer I go back upstairs and keep pretending everything's fine?" Antonio looked at Nico like this was somehow his fault. "You brought her into this." "She was already in this." Nico's voice stayed level. "The moment Gavin started using her as part of his play. We can either keep treating her like she's fragile, or we can give her the information she needs to protect herself." "She's my daughter." "I'm right here." Elena leaned forward. "And I'm 26 years old enough to make my own choices, smart enough to understand the risks, and angry enough to want Gavin's head on a platter. So either tell me what you know or I'll walk upstairs and confront him myself. Your choice." Her Uncle Michael laughed, sharp, surprised sound. "She's definitely your daughter, Antonio. Got your talent for ultimatums." "This isn't funny." But Antonio's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. He'd built an empire by knowing when to fight and when to adapt. "Fine. You want in? Here's what we know." He nodded to Vincent, who pulled up files on the wall screens. Photos of Gavin appeared. Meeting with men Elena didn't recognize. Entering buildings, surveillance timestamps, financial records showing transfers. "Gavin Hale." Vincent's voice carried the dry precision of someone who'd spent decades turning criminal enterprise into spreadsheets. "Approached the Constantine organization 4 months ago. Offered to sell information about our operations in exchange for territory and percentage of their East Side operations once they eliminate us." Elena's stomach turned. 4 months. He'd been planning this since before he'd proposed. He's provided them with shipment schedules, security rotation patterns, supplier contacts, and detailed information about family structure. Vincent clicked through documents. Everything they'd need to plan a hostile takeover. In return, they promised him control of your father's legitimate business holdings and your hand in marriage as public proof of continuity. "They plan to keep me?" Elena's voice came out hollow. "They plan to use you." James Chen spoke up, his Taiwanese accent barely noticeable after 30 years in Chicago. "Publicly marry you to Gavin to maintain appearance of family blessing. Privately leverage you against any remaining Caruso loyalists. Classic consolidation strategy. Keeps the infrastructure intact while eliminating leadership." The screens showed more images. The Constantine brothers, Dmitri and Alexei. Faces that looked like they'd been carved with dull knives and bad intentions. Their operation controlled everything north of Lincoln Park. Trafficking, drugs, protection rackets. The kind of people who made Antonio's organization look almost civilized. We've been tracking Gavin's communications for 6 weeks. Nico pulled up transcripts, coded messages, burner phones, the whole amateur hour tradecraft kit. He thinks he's being clever. Mostly he's just making our surveillance easier. 6 weeks. Elena looked at her father. You've known for 6 weeks and you let me keep planning a wedding? We needed him confident, unsuspicious. Antonio's voice carried something that might have been regret in another man. If he thought we knew, he'd run to the Constantines early. We'd lose the chance to document the full network, find everyone involved. So you used me as bait without telling me. Elena's hands fisted in her lap. I kept you safe. Antonio met her eyes. Everything I do is to keep you safe. Safe and ignorant aren't the same thing. But Elena forced herself to focus. Anger later, information now. What's the plan? How do we take them down? Vincent pulled up a new file. Gavin's meeting with Dmitry Constantine tomorrow night. Final exchange. He's supposed to deliver security codes for the primary warehouse and detailed information about the monthly collection routes. In return, they're giving him access codes to offshore accounts and confirmation of the timeline for the takeover. Tomorrow night? Elena looked at Nico. That's fast. That's urgent. Nico's expression stayed grim. The Constantines are pushing for acceleration, which means something's made them nervous. Maybe another player moving into their territory, maybe internal pressure. Either way, they want this done. So we let the meeting happen. James Chen leaned back in his chair. We've got surveillance ready. We'll record everything. Build an airtight case against Gavin and the Constantines. And then what? Elena asked. Hand the evidence to the FBI? The Constantines have law enforcement in their pocket. Gavin will lawyer up. You'll never make charges stick. We're not building a legal case. Michael's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who solved problems with finality. We're building justification. Once we have proof of the betrayal, we move on both sides. Take out the Constantine's leadership. Make an example of Gavin. Send a message that this is what happens when you move against us. Elena looked at the faces around the table. Her father. Her uncle. Men who'd spent decades in this world, and realized with sudden cold clarity what they were actually describing. You're going to kill them. Not a question. Statement of fact. We're going to eliminate a threat to the organization. Antonio's voice stayed carefully neutral. It's business, Elena, not personal. It's murder dressed up in corporate language. She turned to Nico. Is that what you do? Kill people who inconvenience you? I protect my interest. Nico's eyes didn't waver. Which includes making sure threats don't become catastrophes. The Constantines have killed 17 people in the last year. Gavin's betrayal would have gotten your entire family slaughtered. This isn't about convenience, it's about survival. Elena's breath came short. There has to be another way. Name it, her father challenged. Tell me how we neutralize a hostile takeover attempt without sending the message that betrayal has consequences. Tell me how we protect our people when we've got enemies planning to burn everything we've built. She couldn't. That was the hell of it. She'd grown up in this world, but always at a distance, always protected from the sharp edges. Now she was sitting at the table where decisions got made and realizing that the luxury of moral high ground came from never having to make impossible choices. What do you need from me? The words came out steady despite the chaos in her chest. Antonio blinked. What? You brought me down here, showed me all this. Either you want my help or you're just making sure I understand why I need to stay quiet. Elena met her father's eyes. Which is it? The men exchanged looks, some kind of silent communication that Elena couldn't quite parse. Finally, Nico spoke. Gavin's getting nervous. He's been asking questions about you tonight. Where you went. Why you disappeared from the party. If we're not careful, he'll suspect something's wrong. So I need to go back upstairs and play the loving fiancé. Elena's stomach turned. Pretend everything's fine while you prepare to execute him. We need you to keep him comfortable for 24 hours. Vincent pulled up a schedule. Tomorrow night he'll go to the meeting. We'll get everything we need. Then it's over. Just 24 hours of lying. Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. Should be easy. I've been lying to myself about loving him for 6 months. Elena, her father's voice softened slightly. If this is too much, it's not too much. It's too late. She stood up. I'm already in this. Already a target. Already complicit just by being his fiancée and not seeing what he was. She looked at Nico. You said I could be operational asset instead of operational risk? Prove it. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. Nico studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow afternoon, Gavin's supposed to meet you for lunch. Pre-wedding planning, venue discussion, normal couple activities. He'll use it to pump you for information, Vincent added. He's been asking careful questions, trying to figure out family schedules, security rotations, anything that might help the Constantines plan their move. So I feed him false information. Elena's mind started working. Strategic thinking her father had never trained her for, but she'd absorbed anyway through years of observation. Give him details that sound real, but lead them wrong. Exactly. Nico pulled up a document. We've prepared a script. Security changes that aren't actually happening. Schedule modifications that put people in the wrong places. Enough truth mixed with fiction that he won't suspect. And I just casually mention these things over salad? Elena scanned the document. He'll know I don't usually have access to this information. Tell him your father's been including you in more family business discussions, James suggested. Preparation for when you're married, teaching you to be proper wife to an ambitious man in the organization. The irony was almost funny. Almost. Fine. Elena memorized the key points. Lunch tomorrow. Feed him lies. Keep him confident. Then what? Then you stay away from him. Antonio's voice went hard. Tomorrow night, you're staying here, in the secure wing, with protection. You don't go anywhere near wherever Gavin is. But non-negotiable. Her father's tone allowed no argument. You've done enough. More than enough. The rest is our work. Elena wanted to fight, wanted to demand full inclusion, but she looked at the faces around the table, men who'd spent their lives in violence, and recognized the wall she'd hit. They'd let her in this far. Further would require either time or proof she could handle the darkest parts of their world. Understood. She turned to Nico. Walk me out? He nodded. Gentlemen, we'll reconvene at 0600 for final preparation. They left the conference room together. The hallway stretched ahead, concrete and shadows and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. You did well in there. Nico's voice stayed quiet. Most people would have run or broken down. You stayed sharp. Most people don't find out their fiancé's planning to sell them to human traffickers. Elena's laugh came out shaky. My bar for doing well has gotten pretty low. Elena. He stopped walking, turned to face her. What I said in the elevator about staying away, about wanting... He cut himself off. This isn't the right time. When is the right time? She stepped closer. After you've killed Gavin. After the Constantines are eliminated, after the next crisis and the one after that, there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to be a moment when loving you doesn't come with a target on my back. That's exactly why you should stop trying to protect me from my own choices. Elena's voice went fierce. I'm not fragile. I'm not some porcelain doll that'll shatter if reality touches me. I'm standing here offering to help you destroy the man I was supposed to marry. I'm choosing to stay in this world, even though I had an escape route planned. Stop treating me like I can't handle the consequences of wanting you. Nico's control cracked, just for a second. She saw something raw and desperate flash across his face before he locked it down again. After tomorrow. His voice came out rough. After we've dealt with this threat. Then we can talk about consequences and wanting and everything that comes with that. Promise? She hated how young she sounded, how hopeful. Promise. He reached out, finally closed the distance, touched her face with careful fingers like she might disappear if he held on too tight. But right now, I need you to go back to that party. Smile. Play your part. Keep Gavin thinking everything's fine. Can you do that? Elena leaned into his touch for just a moment. Let herself have this one thing, then stepped back, straightened her spine. Became the performance everyone needed. I've been playing parts my whole life. She turned toward the elevator. One more night won't kill me. Elena. Nico's voice stopped her at the threshold. Thank you for trusting me with this, for not running even though you could have. She looked back at him. I'm not running from you, Nico. I'm running towards something better than protection and distance and careful management, whether you're ready for that or not. The elevator doors closed between them. Elena rode it up to the main level, letting herself have exactly 30 seconds of shaking hands and rapid breathing and the terror of what she'd just agreed to. Then she locked it down, smoothed her dress, fixed her expression. The party was winding down when she returned. Gavin found her immediately, all concern and manufactured worry. There you are. I was getting worried. Your mother said you weren't feeling well? His hand touched her arm. The same hand that had typed messages to men planning to murder her father. Elena smiled, leaned into him, became exactly what he expected. Just needed some air. All this excitement. It's overwhelming. She let her voice carry just the right note of breathless bride. But I'm fine now. Perfect, actually. Good. He kissed her forehead, tender, loving, complete fiction. Because I was hoping we could steal a few minutes. Talk about tomorrow's lunch? I have some ideas about the venue that I think you'll love. I can't wait to hear them. Elena let him guide her toward a quiet corner. Let him talk about flower arrangements and seating charts and all the details of a wedding that would never happen. And while he spoke, she watched, cataloged, noticed things she'd trained herself to overlook before. The way his eyes moved constantly, tracking people. The way his questions probed for information disguised as small talk. The way he touched her like she was property he'd already acquired. 24 hours. She could manage 24 hours of this performance. Then everything would change. The party finally ended around 2 a.m. Guests departed in waves of expensive cars and subtle security details. Gavin kissed her goodnight at the door with promises about tomorrow's lunch. Elena watched him leave, watched his car disappear into Chicago's nighttime traffic. Then she went to find her father. Antonio was in his study, alone, looking older than he had in the conference room. He glanced up when she entered, something unreadable crossing his face. You should be sleeping. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. I know. Elena sat. I wanted to ask you something before everything happens. Ask? Did you know? She met his eyes. When Gavin first started pursuing me, when he asked permission to propose, did you know what he was? Antonio was quiet for a long moment. I knew he was ambitious. I knew he wanted access to the organization. I thought... He stopped. I thought he was like every other young man who's tried to marry into this family, looking for power, position, legitimacy. I didn't think he was stupid enough to betray us. But you let me accept his proposal anyway. I thought you loved him. Her father's voice went soft. You seemed happy. For the first time since... He cut himself off. Since Mom stopped being present for anything except pills and parties, Elena finished. Since Uncle Leo got killed and you stopped letting me anywhere near the actual family business? Since you decided the best way to protect me was to turn me into expensive decoration? I was trying to give you a different life. Antonio's hands fisted on the desk. A better life. One where you didn't have to know about the things I've done, the choices I've made, the blood that built everything you've ever had. You were trying to keep me ignorant. Elena's voice stayed gentle despite the words. And maybe that worked when I was a kid. But I grew up, Dad. I started noticing things, patterns, the way people defer to you, the way money moves, the reality behind the legitimate business facade. You can't protect someone from truth forever. I can try. His jaw clenched. I'm your father. That's my job. Your job is to trust me enough to make my own choices. She leaned forward. Including the choice to stay, to help. To be part of this family in a real way instead of just being the daughter you keep locked in a tower. Antonio studied her face like he was seeing someone new. You really want this? The weight of it? The darkness? I want agency over my own life. Elena held his stare. Whatever that looks like. Wherever that leads. With all the consequences that come with it. Her father nodded slowly. Then after tomorrow, after we've dealt with this threat, we'll talk about your role, about what you can handle, about bringing you in properly instead of keeping you at a distance. Thank you. Elena stood, moved around the desk, hugged her father for the first time in what felt like years. I know you think you're protecting me. But Dad, the cage you built to keep me safe is just another kind of prison. She left him sitting there, went to her room, lay awake until dawn, thinking about tomorrow, about lies she'd tell over lunch, about Nico's promise, about the moment everything would change, about the fact that she'd traded freedom in Boston for war in Chicago and somehow felt more alive than she had in years. The morning light came through Elena's bedroom window like an interrogation lamp, harsh, unforgiving, exposing every crack in her carefully maintained composure. She'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, her mind cycling through the script Vincent had prepared, the lies she'd need to sell, the performance that would determine whether Gavin walked into tomorrow night's trap confident or suspicious. Her phone buzzed at 7:30. Text from Gavin. Can't wait for lunch. Reserved us a table at Meridian. Noon? We have so much to plan. Elena stared at the message. Meridian. Upscale restaurant in the Loop. Public enough to feel safe. Private enough for intimate conversation. Exactly the kind of place where an ambitious man would take his fiancée to discuss their future while secretly planning her family's destruction. She typed back, perfect. See you there. 3 hours to prepare. 3 hours to become someone who didn't know her fiancé was a traitor. Someone who still believed in white dresses and flower arrangements and the fiction of happily ever after. Elena showered until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the previous night's revelations. Dressed in cream silk and pearls, the uniform of a Caruso daughter preparing for wedding planning. Applied makeup with the precision of someone going into battle. Because that's what this was. War conducted over white tablecloths and wine lists. Her father knocked at 9. May I come in? It's your house. But she opened the door wider. Antonio entered carrying a small leather box. He looked like he'd slept about as well as she had, shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. I wanted to give you something before you go. He opened the box. Inside, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant. At first glance, just expensive jewelry. On closer inspection, Elena noticed the pendant's unusual weight, the tiny seam along its edge. Panic button, her father explained. Press it twice and it sends a signal directly to my security team. GPS tracker built in. If anything goes wrong at lunch, if Gavin says or does anything that makes you uncomfortable, you activate this and we come for you immediately. Elena took the necklace, feeling its weight. You think he might try something? I think desperate men do unpredictable things. Antonio's voice carried the careful control of someone fighting not to lock his daughter in a tower. And I think sending you into this without every possible safeguard would make me a terrible father. You're not a terrible father. Elena fastened the chain around her neck. The pendant settled just below her collarbone. You're just a father who built an empire on violence and doesn't know how to let his daughter grow up in the same world that made him. Maybe I don't want you to grow up in this world. He met her eyes. Maybe I want better for you. Better isn't the same as different. She straightened the pendant. And it's too late anyway. I'm already here. Already choosing this. You can either fight me or train me. Antonio studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. After tomorrow, when this is over, we'll talk about training. He left her alone with that promise and the weight of a panic button disguised as jewelry. At 11:15, Elena's phone rang. Nico's number. You ready? His voice carried that dark edge that made her pulse quicken despite everything. As I'll ever be. She checked her reflection one final time. Perfect daughter, perfect fiancé, perfect lie. Did you want to go over the script again? You know the script. I called to tell you something else. He paused. Marco's going to be at Meridian. Different table. You won't see him, but he'll be there. Watching, listening. If Gavin deviates from pattern, if anything feels wrong, Marco will intervene. You're having me followed to lunch with my fiancé. I'm making sure you come back from lunch with your fiancé. Nico's voice went hard. There's a difference. Elena should have been angry. Should have fought the surveillance, the protection, the constant management. Instead, she felt something warm settle in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. His tone softened slightly. Just come back safe. We'll handle the rest. The line went dead. Elena grabbed her purse, checked that she had everything she needed for the performance, and headed downstairs. Her mother intercepted her in the foyer, elegant, distant, moving through the world like a ghost haunting her own life. Lunch with Gavin? Catherine Caruso's voice carried the careful modulation of someone who'd learned to feel nothing so nothing could hurt her. That's nice, darling. You should discuss the flowers. I always thought peonies were overdone. I'll keep that in mind, Mom. Elena kissed her mother's cheek, felt the familiar ache of loving someone who'd chemically removed herself from reality years ago. He's a good match. Her mother smoothed Elena's hair with fingers that trembled slightly. Your father approves. That's important in this family. Elena wondered what her mother would say if she knew the truth. Would Catherine even process it, or would the information just slide off the pharmaceutical barrier she'd built between herself and the world her husband had created? I should go. Don't want to be late. Of course not. Her mother drifted toward the sitting room. Punctuality is important. Your father always says punctuality shows respect. Elena watched her disappear, then left before the weight of her mother's carefully maintained denial could crack something open in her chest. The drive to Meridian took 20 minutes through lunch traffic. Elena's driver, one of her father's people, silent and professional, navigated the loop with practiced efficiency. She spent the time reviewing the script in her mind. Security changes that weren't real. Schedule modifications that would send the Constantine chasing ghosts. Information that sounded legitimate because it was wrapped in enough truth to pass cursory inspection. Meridian occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower overlooking the river. All clean lines and expensive views. The kind of place where deals got made and appearances got maintained. Elena stepped out of the car into February cold that bit through her coat. Inside, warmth and understated elegance. The hostess recognized her immediately, benefits of being Antonio Caruso's daughter, and guided her to a corner table where Gavin was already waiting. He stood when she approached, smiled with perfectly practiced warmth, pulled out her chair like a gentleman, every gesture calibrated, every movement designed to present the image of devoted fiancé. You look beautiful. He kissed her cheek. His cologne was expensive. His suit was custom. Everything about him screamed ambition dressed in civility. I already ordered champagne. I hope that's okay. Perfect. Elena settled into her chair, cataloging details with new eyes. The way he'd positioned himself with a view of the entrance. The way his phone sat face down on the table within easy reach. The slight tension in his jaw that suggested he was working harder than usual to maintain his performance. The champagne arrived. Gavin made a toast about their future, their partnership, building something beautiful together. Elena touched her glass to his and sipped expensive lies. So, he set down his flute. I've been thinking about the venue. I know we discussed the Four Seasons, but what about somewhere more intimate? The peninsula has that beautiful ballroom, more suitable for the kind of wedding that reflects both our families' positions. Translation: somewhere that would photograph well for the social pages when the Constantines needed to demonstrate continuity after murdering her father. The peninsula could work. Elena kept her voice light, interested. Though Dad's been talking about expanding the guest list. Apparently there are business associates who'd be offended if they weren't included. How many are we talking? Gavin's interest sharpened. I thought we were keeping it to close family and friends. First probe. Testing to see what she knew about her father's organization structure. You know how it is. Elena laughed softly. In our world, close friends includes everyone Dad does business with. He mentioned something about 300 guests minimum, maybe more if we include the West Coast connections. She watched Gavin process this, watched him calculate what 300 guests meant in terms of security arrangements, family structure, potential complications to whatever the Constantines were planning. That's substantial. He reached for her hand across the table. I want to make sure you get the wedding you deserve, not just what politics demands. I appreciate that. Elena laced her fingers through his, felt nothing, less than nothing. But I've learned lately that sometimes what we deserve and what politics demands are the same thing. Learned from who? The question came too fast, too sharp. From Dad. She delivered the line exactly as Vincent had scripted it. He's been including me in more family discussions. Says once we're married, I'll need to understand the business side of things, how everything connects. He's been surprisingly open about operations lately. Gavin's grip tightened slightly on her hand. Really? That's unexpected. Antonio's usually so protective of you. I think he's realizing I'm not a child anymore. Elena sipped her champagne. And that understanding the family business will make me a better partner for you. He talks about you a lot, actually, about how ambitious you are, how you're going to help expand our legitimate operations. I'm flattered he has that kind of confidence in me. Gavin's smile stayed perfect, but his eyes went calculating. What kind of things has he been sharing? Here. This was the moment. Feed him lies wrapped in truth. Make him believe she was innocently revealing information she didn't understand was sensitive. Elena leaned forward conspiratorially. Promise you won't tell him I said anything? He made me swear not to discuss business outside the family. Of course, this is between us. He's restructuring security. She pitched her voice just right, excited to share secrets, unaware of their significance. Apparently there's been some concerns about the warehouse district. He's moving primary operations from the Southside facility to a new location in Bridgeport. Very hush-hush. Even most of the soldiers don't know yet. She watched Gavin absorb this. The Southside warehouse was real. The move to Bridgeport was fiction, but Gavin had no way to verify that without revealing he was monitoring her family's operations. When's this happening? He kept his tone casually interested. Next week sometime. Dad said something about needing all senior people on site for the transition. He's worried about vulnerability during the move. She paused. Actually, he mentioned you specifically. Said he wants you there. Thinks it's important for you to start understanding our logistics infrastructure. Another lie. But one that would make Gavin think the Caruso family was concentrating leadership in one location at a specific time. Perfect opportunity for the Constantines to strike if they believed it. That's quite an honor. Gavin squeezed her hand. Your father trusting me with that level of operational detail. He says you're family now, or will be soon enough. Elena smiled. Besides, he's impressed with your business acumen. He showed me some of your consulting proposals, the ones about expanding the import operations through alternative shipping routes. She was making this up entirely now, creating fictional business proposals that didn't exist. But Gavin couldn't deny knowing about them without admitting he hadn't actually been doing legitimate consulting work. I'm glad he found those useful. Gavin's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone navigating a minefield. I've been working on several proposals. Hard to keep track of which ones I've formally presented. Well, he's definitely interested in the East Coast shipping expansion. Elena delivered this fabrication with perfect conviction. He mentioned wanting to discuss it with you directly. Something about meeting next Thursday to go over implementation details. Next Thursday. 3 days after tomorrow night's meeting with the Constantines. 3 days after Gavin would already be dead or captured, and this fictional meeting would never happen. But he didn't know that. Thursday works for me. Gavin pulled out his phone, made a note, creating a paper trail of his own deception. I'll make sure I'm available. The waiter appeared to take their lunch orders. Elena chose a salad she had no intention of eating. Gavin ordered steak, medium rare, the kind of meal a man eats when he thinks he's winning. After the waiter left, Gavin shifted topics. I wanted to ask you something. Last night at the party, you disappeared for a while. Your mother said you weren't feeling well. Elena had prepared for this. Wedding stress, she waved a hand dismissively. All the planning, all the expectations. I just needed some air. Found a quiet corner and took a few minutes to breathe. You could have told me. I would have come with you. I know. But sometimes a girl needs a moment alone, you know? She smiled. Besides, you were networking, building those connections Dad values so much. I didn't want to interrupt. You're never an interruption. Gavin reached across the table again, cupped her face with what was probably meant to look like tenderness. You're the reason I'm doing any of this. Building a future for us, making sure we have everything we deserve. Elena let him hold her face, look into her eyes, sell her the fiction of his devotion. and she thought about Nico's words from the elevator, about how Gavin planned to deliver her to the Constantines, about what they would have done to her. I love you too. The lie came out smooth as silk, easy as breathing. I can't wait to be your wife. Something flickered in Gavin's eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. Or guilt. Hard to tell with men who'd trained themselves to perform emotion instead of feel it. Their food arrived. Elena pushed salad around her plate while Gavin talked about honeymoon destinations and investment properties and the beautiful life they'd build together. She nodded in appropriate places, asked questions that suggested interest, played the part of the eager bride. And across the restaurant, Marco sat alone at a corner table, reading a newspaper and listening to every word through surveillance equipment Elena couldn't see but knew was there. Halfway through the meal, Gavin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and for just a second, his mask slipped. Elena caught a flash of something, stress, maybe concern, before he smoothed it away. Everything okay? She kept her voice light. Fine. Just work. He silenced the phone. Nothing that can't wait. But his shoulders had tensed, his jaw tightened. Whatever that message said, it had rattled him. Elena filed it away. Information to share later, pattern break that might mean something. She steered conversation back to wedding planning, discussed flowers and music and seating arrangements with the enthusiasm expected of a bride-to-be. Fed him more scripted intelligence mixed with genuine details about cousins and family dynamics. Made him feel like she was his inside source to the Caruso family operations. By the time dessert arrived, something chocolate and expensive that neither of them touched, Gavin had relaxed again, confident, secure in his deception. I'm really glad we did this. He signaled for the check. I feel like we've been so busy lately, we haven't had enough time just for us. We should make it a regular thing, Elena smiled. Weekly lunches, just the two of us. A chance to talk about everything without family or work interrupting. I'd like that. Gavin paid the check, left a generous tip, helped her with her coat like a perfect gentleman. Can I give you a ride back? I know you have your father's driver, but actually I have some errands to run. Elena touched the pendant at her throat, drawing his attention to expensive jewelry instead of emergency technology. Shopping for the wedding, you know how it is. Of course. He kissed her at the restaurant entrance, long enough to sell devotion, not long enough to suggest possession. I'll call you tonight? I'll be waiting. Another lie. By tonight, she'd be locked in her father's secure wing while Gavin walked into a trap. She watched him leave in a town car that was probably assigned by the Constantines. Watched until he disappeared into loop traffic. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Nico. It's done. He bought everything. The response came immediately. Good. Car's waiting. Come home. Home. The Caruso mansion, the place she'd tried to escape less than 24 hours ago. Funny how quickly things shifted. How cage became fortress depending on what you were protecting yourself from. Marco appeared at her elbow like a ghost materializing from shadow. Miss Caruso, your car's this way. She followed him to a black SUV with tinted windows. Different from the sedan that had brought her. Different driver. Higher level of security. Marco opened the door, waited until she was settled, then climbed into the front passenger seat. The driver pulled into traffic without a word. Did you get everything? Elena asked. Every word. Marco's voice carried satisfaction. He took the bait on all the false intelligence, made notes on his phone. We've got him documenting his own deception. What about the text he received? The one that made him nervous? Marco glanced back at her with something that might have been respect. You caught that? Hard to miss. He went tense. Checked his phone 3 times after that, even though he'd silenced it. Elena leaned forward. What was it? We're still working on that. His phone's encrypted. We can track incoming messages, but not always content. Marco's jaw tightened. But timing suggests it came from the Constantines, probably confirming tomorrow night's meeting. The SUV navigated toward the mansion through afternoon traffic. Elena watched the city slide past. Her city, the place she'd planned to leave. Now the battleground where tomorrow night something decisive would happen. Can I ask you something? She directed the question at Marco's reflection in the rear-view mirror. Yes, ma'am. How long have you worked for Nico? 12 years. Marco's expression didn't change. Since I was 22 and stupid enough to think I could run my own crew. What happened? I moved into territory I didn't understand, made enemies I couldn't handle. Mr. Valenti could have eliminated me. Instead, he offered me a choice, work for him or work against him. Marco's lips quirked slightly. Turned out working for him was smarter. You ever regret it, the choice? Every day I'm still breathing instead of buried in an unmarked grave. No, ma'am. No regrets. Elena processed that. He's good at that, isn't he? Turning potential threats into assets. Best I've ever seen. Marco met her eyes in the mirror. He sees what people can become instead of just what they are. Then he gives them the chance to prove it. They pulled through the mansion gates. Security had visibly increased. More men, more cameras, more tension in the air. The estate that had felt like a prison yesterday now felt like a fortress preparing for siege. Antonio waited in the foyer. He pulled Elena into a hug the moment she entered. Uncharacteristic display of emotion from a man who'd built walls around feelings decades ago. You're safe. He said it like confirmation, like he'd spent the last 2 hours fighting not to pull her out of that restaurant. I'm fine, Dad. But she hugged him back. It went exactly as planned. He believed everything. Good. Antonio released her, studied her face. Nico wants to debrief you. Conference room. And Elena? His voice went softer. What you did today took courage. Real courage. I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than she expected. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and headed for the elevator. The conference room held the same men as last night, plus 2 new faces. Both younger, harder, wearing the kind of casual violence that came from years in enforcement work. Nico stood when she entered. His eyes tracked over her like he was inventorying for damage. You okay? Better than Gavin will be tomorrow night. Elena took a seat at the table. I gave him everything on the script. He documented it all, made notes, asked follow-up questions that confirmed he's passing intel to someone. Vincent pulled out his tablet. Walk us through it. Every detail, everything he said, how he reacted, what seemed important to him. Elena spent the next hour reconstructing the lunch conversation. The men listened with professional attention, occasionally asking clarifying questions, building a complete picture of Gavin's deception. When she finished, James Chen leaned back in his chair. He's definitely escalating. That text he received, we intercepted it. Came from a burner phone registered to one of the Constantine's known associates. Message just said, tomorrow, 2200. Confirm. 10 p.m. tomorrow. Michael checked his watch. 29 hours from now. What's the location? Elena asked. Warehouse in Pilsen. Nico pulled up a map on the wall screen. Neutral ground. The Constantines use it for meetings with people they don't fully trust yet. Enough isolated that they feel secure. Enough exit routes that they can run if it's a trap. Except this time it actually is a trap. Elena studied the map. What's the plan? The men exchanged looks. Antonio spoke carefully. Elena, you've done your part. More than enough. The rest is something I have a right to know about. She cut him off. You brought me in. You trusted me with the intelligence work. Don't push me out now just because it's getting violent. It's not about trust. Nico's voice stayed level. It's about keeping you as far from operational risk as possible. I'm already at risk. Elena stood up, moved to the map. Gavin made me at risk. The Constantines made me at risk. My last name made me at risk the day I was born. Stop pretending distance equals safety and tell me what you're planning. Silence held the room. Finally, Antonio nodded. Show her. Vincent pulled up tactical diagrams. We've had surveillance on this warehouse for 3 weeks. We know the layout. We know their usual security setup. We know approximately how many people they'll have on site. Tomorrow night, Gavin arrives at 10. He meets with Dmitry Constantine. They conduct the exchange. He gives them the intelligence you fed him at lunch. They give him access codes and confirmation of timeline. James pointed to specific locations on the diagram. We let the meeting happen. Let them incriminate themselves. Record everything. Then we move. Michael's voice went flat, cold. Tactical team surrounds the warehouse. No exit. No escape. We take the Constantine into custody along with everyone involved in the conspiracy. Custody. Elena looked at her uncle. That's an interesting word choice for what you actually mean. We're eliminating a threat to the family. Antonio met her eyes. Permanently, completely, in a way that sends a clear message about what happens to people who move against us. You're going to kill everyone in that warehouse. Not a question, statement of fact. We're going to neutralize a hostile force that planned to murder our family and destroy our organization. Nico stepped beside her. There's a difference. Is there? Elena studied the map. Or is that just the story we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night? I sleep fine. Michael's tone suggested he'd had this conversation before and wasn't interested in revisiting moral philosophy. Because I know that if we don't move decisively, if we show weakness or hesitation, 10 other ambitious crews will see it as opportunity. We'll spend the next year fighting territorial challenges and hostile takeovers. People who've been loyal will start questioning if we're strong enough to protect them. Everything your father built will crack and crumble because we were too civilized to do what survival requires. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to find the moral high ground, but she'd sat across from Gavin at lunch and watched him perform love while planning her destruction. She understood now that mercy was a luxury purchased with other people's blood. What about Gavin specifically? She forced herself to ask. What happens to him? The room went quiet. Antonio spoke carefully. That depends on what he does tomorrow night, how he reacts when everything falls apart, whether he fights or runs or tries to negotiate. But most likely he dies. Elena made herself say it, made herself face it. Most likely you kill the man I was supposed to marry. Yes. Nico didn't soften it. Most likely he dies. And if he doesn't, if we take him alive, he spends the rest of his life wishing we hadn't. Those are the options. No clean endings, no easy answers. Elena nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? Her father blinked. That's it? No arguments? No moral objections? Oh, I have moral objections. She turned to face the room. I object to living in a world where this is necessary. I object to being part of a system built on violence and fear. I object to the fact that my choices are complicity or ignorance, and both make me responsible. She took a breath. But objecting doesn't change reality. And reality is that Gavin chose to betray us, chose to align with people who would have tortured me for leverage, chose his ambition over basic humanity. So yes. Okay. Do what you need to do. Nico studied her like he was seeing someone new. You sure about this? I'm sure I don't want to be protected from consequences anymore. Elena met his eyes. I'm sure I'd rather face ugly truth than live in comfortable lies. And I'm sure that if I'm going to be part of this family in any real way, I need to understand exactly what that means, including the parts that keep me awake at night. Her father moved closer, put his hand on her shoulder. After tomorrow, we can talk about getting you out. Clean break, new identity, Boston or anywhere else you want. You've done enough, more than enough. You don't have to stay in this world. What if I want to stay? The question surprised her as much as it surprised him. Why would you want this? Antonio's voice carried genuine confusion. The violence? The constant threat? The weight of decisions that destroy lives? Because it's real. Elena touched the pendant at her throat. Panic button disguised as jewelry, symbol of a father trying to protect a daughter who'd outgrown protection. Because for the first time in my life, people are treating me like I matter. Not as decoration, not as liability, but as someone who can contribute, someone with value beyond my last name and my potential to marry well. She looked at Nico. Someone who gets to make choices instead of just living with other people's decisions. Choices come with costs. Nico's voice went rough. Weight you can't put down, knowledge you can't unknow. Tomorrow night, people die. Maybe Gavin, definitely others. And you'll know you helped make that possible, that your intelligence work at lunch contributed to their deaths. You ready for that weight? Elena thought about the elevator, about Nico admitting he'd stayed away to protect her, about 24 hours ago when she'd been running toward freedom, that looked like loneliness disguised as independence. "I'm ready." She said it with conviction she didn't entirely feel, but needed to claim anyway. "I'm ready to stop being managed and start being trusted, whatever that requires." The men around the table absorbed this. Her father looked torn between pride and horror. Her uncle looked grimly approving. Vincent and James looked professionally neutral. Nico looked at her like she'd just stepped off a cliff, and he wasn't sure if she was falling or flying. "Then here's what happens next." Antonio's voice shifted to command mode. "Elena, you stay in the secure wing tomorrow night. Full protection detail. No arguments. You don't need to see what happens in that warehouse. But non-negotiable." Her father's tone left no room for discussion. "You've proven you can handle the intelligence work, the strategic thinking. But the violence itself? That's our burden, not yours. Let us carry that weight." Elena wanted to fight, wanted to demand full inclusion. But she recognized the wall she'd hit, the line her father wouldn't let her cross. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Understood." She looked at Nico. "And after? After tomorrow night when it's over?" "After. We keep you safe while things settle." Nico's expression stayed controlled, but his eyes carried heat that had nothing to do with business. "Then we have the conversation we've been avoiding for 3 years. About what you want versus what you allow yourself to want." Elena stepped closer to him, aware of every eye in the room watching. "About distance and protection and all the lies we tell ourselves about why we can't have what we actually need." "Elena," Antonio's warning carried weight. "It's fine, Antonio." Nico didn't look away from her. "Your daughter's right. We've been avoiding this conversation. Might as well have it in front of witnesses, so everyone's clear on where things stand." "Where do things stand?" Elena challenged. "Right now, complicated, dangerous, inadvisable from every strategic standpoint." Nico's voice dropped lower. "After tomorrow? After we've eliminated the immediate threat? Still complicated, still dangerous, but maybe possible. If you're still sure you want this, want me, want everything that comes with that choice." "I'm sure." Elena held his stare. "Question is whether you're brave enough to let yourself want something you can't control." Heat flashed in Nico's eyes. "We'll find out tomorrow night." Antonio cleared his throat loudly. "If you two are finished conducting your personal negotiations in my war room, we have operational details to finalize." Elena stepped back, suddenly aware she'd just declared her intentions in front of her father, her uncle, and half the family's senior leadership. Her face heated, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she turned to her father. "What do you need from me tomorrow?" "Stay in the secure wing. Let us work. Try not to worry." Antonio's expression softened slightly. "And know that everything we're doing to keep you and this family safe." "I know, Dad." She moved to the door. "I'll be in my room if you need me." "Elena." Nico's voice stopped her at the threshold. "Thank you for trusting us with this, for being braver than you needed to be." She looked back at him. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid." Then she left them to their tactical planning and walked back to her room on legs that shook slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Inside her bedroom, the space she'd been so desperate to escape, Elena locked the door and let herself finally fall apart. Not crying, just shaking, trembling with the accumulated weight of performance and deception and the slow realization of what she'd actually agreed to participate in. Tomorrow night, men would die. Maybe Gavin. Definitely others. And she'd helped make it possible by lying over lunch about warehouse locations and security schedules. She'd chosen this. Chosen to stay. Chosen to be complicit rather than ignorant. And the most terrifying part? She wasn't sure she regretted it. Her phone buzzed. Text from Nico. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long." She typed back. "Will you tell me what happens?" "After." "Will you let me know how it went?" His response came quickly. "Yes. Every detail. No more protection through ignorance. You've earned the truth." Elena set down her phone and stared out her window at the city beyond the gates. Chicago in February twilight, cold and beautiful and brutal. The city she'd tried to leave, the city that had claimed her anyway. 29 hours until everything changed. She intended to be ready, The hours between preparation and execution stretched like wire pulled too tight. Elena spent the next day in her room, watching the clock move with agonizing slowness, while the mansion hummed with controlled chaos below. She could hear them, her father's men moving through hallways, voices low and urgent, the mechanical sounds of weapons being checked and vehicles being staged, the infrastructure of violence preparing to deploy. At 3 in the afternoon, her mother knocked softly and entered carrying a tea service like this was any ordinary Thursday. Catherine Caruso moved through the world in her pharmaceutical haze, arranging cups and saucers with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to function despite the chemicals smoothing her edges. "I thought you might want company." Her mother poured Earl Grey into delicate china. "You've been up here all day. It's not good for you, darling. All this isolation." Elena accepted the cup, studying her mother's face for any sign she understood what was happening tonight. But Catherine's expression remained serene, untouched, safely removed from the reality unfolding around her. "I'm fine, Mom. Just thinking." "About the wedding?" Her mother settled into the chair by the window. "It's normal to have doubts. I had terrible doubts before marrying your father, but everything worked out beautifully." Elena wondered what version of beautifully her mother was remembering. The early years before the violence became impossible to ignore? Before Catherine had started self-medicating to survive marriage to a man who built empires on blood? Before she'd become this ghost haunting her own life? "Did it work out?" Elena asked quietly. "Really?" Something flickered in her mother's eyes, brief, almost human, then gone again behind the pharmaceutical wall. "We make choices, darling. Then we live with them. That's all any of us can do." What if the choices we're living with are destroying us? Catherine's hand trembled slightly on her teacup. For just a moment, Elena saw through to the woman underneath, the person her mother might have been if she'd married someone else, lived a different life, made different compromises. "Then we take our medicine and survive another day." Her mother's voice dropped to barely above whisper. "It's not happiness, Elena, but it's survival. And sometimes survival is enough." The words hit like a punch. Elena set down her cup before her own hands started shaking. "I don't want to just survive, Mom. I want to actually live." "Living is dangerous." Catherine stood, smoothed her skirt with fingers that couldn't quite stay steady. "Your father lives, really lives. Do you see what it costs him? What it costs all of us?" Before Elena could respond, her mother drifted to the door, paused at the threshold. "Be careful what you choose, darling. Some choices can't be unmade. And some prices are higher than you realize until the bill comes due." Then she was gone, leaving Elena alone with cold tea and the weight of warnings delivered through medicated distance. At 6 o'clock, Nico texted, "Status check. You doing okay up there?" Elena typed back, "Define okay. I'm not falling apart if that's what you're asking. That's exactly what I'm asking. This is hard. You're allowed to struggle with it." She stared at the message, surprised by the permission to be human instead of strategic. "Will you tell me when you're leaving? I don't want to just sit here wondering when it starts." "Yes. I'll let you know." "And Elena? What you said yesterday about being tired of being afraid? I understand that more than you know." The message made something ache in her chest. She wanted to ask what he was afraid of, but her door opened and her father entered without knocking, rare breach of privacy that suggested urgency. "We need to talk." Antonio closed the door behind him, leaned against it like he needed the support. "Before tonight happens. Before things change in ways we can't control." Elena set down her phone. "Okay. If this goes wrong," he held up a hand when she started to protest. "Let me finish. If this goes wrong, if the Constantines have better intelligence than we think, if Gavin somehow tipped them off, things could get complicated very fast. I need to know you'll stay here. Stay protected, no matter what you hear or what you think is happening." "Dad, I need your word, Elena." His voice carried the weight of a man facing mortality. "Promise me that no matter what happens tonight, you'll stay in this house. Let Marco and the security team do their jobs. Don't try to be heroic. Don't try to help. Just stay safe." Elena studied her father's face, seeing the fear underneath his control. "You think it might go wrong?" "I think we're moving against people who've survived this long by being unpredictable and vicious. Antonio moved to sit beside her. I think we've planned for every contingency we can imagine, but the ones that kill you are the contingencies you don't see coming. And I think, his voice cracked slightly, I think if something happens to me tonight, I need to know you'll be okay, that you'll survive, that maybe you'll finally take that escape route to Boston and build a life that doesn't include any of this darkness. Nothing's going to happen to you, but Elena's throat tightened. You don't know that, neither do I. He took her hand. So I need to say this now while I can. I'm sorry for building a world where you had to choose between ignorance and complicity, for not teaching you how to protect yourself because I was too busy trying to protect you, for making you feel like a prisoner in your own life. Dad, let me finish. Antonio's grip tightened. You're stronger than I gave you credit for, braver, smarter. Everything you've done the last 2 days, the intelligence work, facing Gavin, making impossible choices, you've handled it better than most of my soldiers would have. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry it took a crisis for me to see you clearly. Elena pulled her father into a hug, feeling him shake slightly against her. Come back safe tonight. Then we'll talk about everything else. About my role, about training, about building something better than what you had to build. If I come back, he kissed the top of her head. If we all come back. But if we don't, if this is the last conversation we have, know that I love you. More than the empire. More than the power. More than any of it. You're the only thing I've ever done that mattered. He left before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. Elena sat frozen, her father's words echoing in her head, the fear underneath them, the possibility that tonight might be the last time she saw him alive. At 8 o'clock, the house went quiet. That sudden absence of sound that meant everyone had moved into position, vehicles had departed, the machinery of violence had deployed toward its target. Marco appeared at her door with 2 other guards, both large, both armed, both wearing expressions that suggested they'd kill anyone who tried to reach her. Miss Caruso. Marco's voice stayed professional. We're securing this wing, no one in or out until we get all clear from Mr. Valenti. You need anything, you ask us. You don't leave this room, understood? Understood. Elena's pulse hammered. They've left? They're on their way to the warehouse? They're in position, waiting for Gavin to arrive. Marco checked his watch. Another 90 minutes until the meet. Then we'll know what we're dealing with. Will you tell me? When it's over? Will someone tell me what happened? Marco's expression softened slightly. Mr. Valenti gave strict instructions. The moment it's done, someone contacts you, no matter the outcome. You'll know. He positioned himself outside her door. The other 2 guards took positions at either end of the hallway. Elena was locked in, protected or imprisoned, depending on perspective. She tried to read, couldn't focus, tried to watch something mindless on her laptop, couldn't process it. Ended up just sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights, imagining the warehouse in Pilsen where men were preparing to kill each other. At 9:45, her phone buzzed. Nico. Gavin just arrived. He's alone. Meeting with Dmitri Konstantin now. So far, everything's tracking according to plan. Elena typed back. Be careful, please, always, sit tight. This'll be over soon. The minutes crawled. Elena watched the clock tick toward 10. Imagined Gavin walking into that warehouse, confident in his betrayal. Imagined the moment he realized the trap, the moment everything fell apart. At 10:15, nothing. Silence from Marco in the hallway. No updates from Nico. Just quiet and the sound of her own breathing. 10:30. Still nothing. Elena's hands started shaking. This was taking too long. The meeting was supposed to be simple. Exchange intelligence, record the confession, move in. Why was it taking so long? At 10:45, she heard it. Distant sound that might have been nothing or might have been gunfire. Hard to tell through walls and distance. But Marco's radio crackled to life, and she caught fragments of urgent voices. Shots fired. Multiple hostiles. Valenti's pinned. Elena lunged for her door, but Marco blocked it before she could get it open. Miss Caruso, stay inside. What's happening? I heard shots. Is Nico... Situation's fluid. We don't have clear intel yet. Marco's face had gone hard. Professional. You need to stay here. Stay protected. That's the order. I don't care about orders. Tell me what's happening. We don't know yet. But his jaw clenched. Communications breaking up. Multiple teams engaged. That's all I've got. Elena shoved past him into the hallway. Then I'm going down to the war room. I can monitor communications from there. I'm not sitting in my bedroom while people are dying. Miss Caruso, you can either escort me or try to stop me, but I'm going. She started for the stairs. Your choice, Marco. He swore under his breath, signaled to the other guards. Fine, but you stay behind us. You don't touch anything, and if I say get down, you hit the floor. Clear? Clear. They moved through the mansion toward the subterranean levels. Elena could hear phones ringing in her father's study, voices urgent and frightened, the sounds of controlled chaos beginning to crack. The war room was already occupied. Vincent and James hunched over communication equipment, both looking grim. Wall screens showed multiple feeds, some live video, some static, some just scrolling data. What happened? Elena demanded. Where's my father? Where's Nico? Vincent looked up, surprise crossing his face. Elena, you shouldn't be here. Tell me what happened, James answered, voice tight. Ambush. The Constantines knew we were coming, had triple the expected security. Fortified positions. They were ready for us. Elena's stomach dropped. How? How did they know? We don't know yet, but the moment our people moved in, the Constantines opened fire. We've got men pinned down, multiple casualties. Vincent's hands flew across keyboards, trying to coordinate response. Your father's team is trapped in the north sector. Valenti's team took heavy fire trying to flank. We're trying to get reinforcements in, but one of the video feeds exploded with light. Elena watched a building's corner disintegrate under what looked like an RPG. They have that level of firepower? They planned for war. James pulled up tactical maps. This wasn't just security. This was a kill box. They wanted us to attack, used Gavin to bait us in. Where is Gavin? Elena moved closer to the screens, searching feeds for any sign of the man she'd lied to over lunch yesterday. Unknown. He was inside with Dimitri when shooting started. Haven't had visuals since. Vincent spoke into a radio. Eagle 1, do you copy? Antonio, respond. Static. Then her father's voice, strained and angry. We're pinned down. Building's on fire. We need extraction now. Working on it. Air support's 2 minutes out. We don't have 2 minutes. They're pushing hard on our position. We need... The transmission cut to screaming static. Dad? Elena grabbed Vincent's arm. Get him back. Get him back right now. I'm trying. Vincent worked the equipment. Eagle 1, do you copy? Antonio? Nothing. Just static and the distant sound of gunfire through the audio feed. Elena felt the room tilt. This was wrong. All of it. The careful planning, the intelligence she'd gathered, the trap they'd set, all of it had somehow inverted. They'd walked into exactly what they'd planned for the Constantines. What about Nico? She forced the words out. Where's his team? James pointed to a different screen. West sector. They were trying to circle around, hit the Constantines from behind, but they got cut off. Last check-in was 3 minutes ago. Try them. Get them on the radio. Miss Caruso, you need to let us work. Get them on the radio. Elena's voice cracked like a whip. I want to know if Nico's alive. James exchanged a look with Vincent, then spoke into his headset. Shadow team, respond. Valenti, do you copy? Silence stretched. Then Marco's radio crackled. A different voice came through. One Elena didn't recognize. Male, accented, cold as winter. Caruso's daughter. I know you're listening. The voice carried casual menace. This is Dimitri Constantine. Your people are dying in my warehouse. Your father's bleeding in the north sector. Valenti's trapped in the west wing with maybe 10 minutes before we burn him out. You want them to live? I want to negotiate. Elena's blood turned to ice. Don't respond. It's a trap. It's already a trap, sweetheart. Dimitri laughed. The trap's been sprung. Your people walked right in. Now I'm offering you a way to save some of them. You listening? Vincent looked at Elena. She nodded slowly. He keyed the microphone. We're listening. Smart. Here's the deal. You give me Elena Caruso, alive, unharmed, delivered to coordinates I'll provide. And I let your people walk out. Everyone lives, everyone goes home. You refuse, and I burn this warehouse with everyone inside it, starting with your boss and working my way down. You're asking us to trade her for them? Vincent's voice went deadly quiet. I'm offering you a choice. The girl or everyone else. You've got 5 minutes to decide before I start executing prisoners. The line clicked off. The war room went silent except for the background noise of gunfire and shouting on the open channels. Elena felt every eye turned toward her, Vincent and James watching her like she was a problem they needed to solve. Marco positioned between her and the door like he already knew what she was going to say and was preparing to stop her. No. Vincent spoke first. Absolutely not. We don't negotiate with these people. We find another way. What other way? Elena moved to the screens. You said yourself we're outgunned. They were ready for us. Our people are trapped and dying. What's the other way, Vincent? We get reinforcements. We call in favors. We don't have time. Elena's voice stayed steady despite the chaos in her chest. He gave us 5 minutes. By the time reinforcements arrive, how many people will be dead? Elena, we can't just hand you over to them. James stood up. You understand what they'll do? This isn't about leverage anymore. This is about revenge, making an example. They'll hurt you in ways that, I know. She cut him off. I understand exactly what I'm agreeing to, but it's my choice, my life, and I'm choosing to trade it for everyone in that warehouse. Your father would never allow it. My father's trapped and bleeding and has maybe minutes to live. Elena's hands fisted at her sides. You think he'd want me safe while all of you die? You think that's the choice he'd make? Marco stepped forward. Mr. Valenti's orders were explicit. Keep you here, keep you protected, no matter what. Nico's orders don't matter if Nico's dead. The words hurt to say. And if there's a chance trading me saves him, saves my father, saves any of you, then that's what we're doing. It's not your call. Vincent's voice went hard. You're not operational command. You don't make tactical decisions. Then who does? Elena challenged. My father's pinned down. Nico's cut off. Michael's team isn't responding. Who exactly is making decisions right now? The question hung in the air. On the screens, another explosion lit up the night. Someone screamed on the open channel. Time was running out. Elena pulled out her phone, typed a message to Nico. Tell me you're alive, please. No response. Just silence from the man who'd promised her truth. She tried her father, same silence. 2 minutes, Dimitri's voice came back over the radio. Clock's ticking, gentlemen. The girl or everyone dies. Choose. Elena made a decision. Get him back on the line. Tell him I'm coming. Elena, no! Vincent reached for her, but she stepped back. Tell him I'm coming, alone, unarmed, in exchange for everyone's safety. Get the coordinates. We can't do it. She used the voice she'd learned from her father, absolute authority that allowed no argument. That's an order. Get those coordinates. Marco moved to physically stop her, but James spoke quietly. Let her. If this is her choice, let her make it. Valenti will kill us. Marco's voice carried certainty. Only if he survives. James keyed the microphone. Constantine, we accept your terms, the girl for everyone. Where do you want her? Dimitri's laugh carried genuine amusement. Smart choice. There's a restaurant 3 blocks west of the warehouse, Celia's. She comes alone. She comes unarmed. She comes in the next 15 minutes or the deal's off and everyone burns. How do we know you'll keep your word? Vincent demanded. You don't. But you know I'll definitely kill everyone if she doesn't show. At least this way you've got a chance. The line clicked off. Elena was already moving toward the door. I need a car. Now. Miss Caruso. Marco tried to block her path, but she stepped around him. You can either help me or waste time trying to stop me. Either way, I'm going. Decide. Vincent swore viciously. Get her a car, single driver, radio, GPS tracker, and someone call Valenti if he's still alive and tell him Elena made this call. Not us. Her. Marco pulled out his phone, made quick arrangements. Car's ready, but I'm driving. Non-negotiable. Fine. Elena headed for the elevator, but we need to move, now. They rushed through the mansion to the underground garage. Marco practically threw her into a black sedan, then peeled out with enough force to make the tires scream. The drive to Pilsen took 12 minutes through light traffic. 12 minutes of Elena trying not to think about what she was walking into, trying not to imagine what Dmitry Konstantin had planned, trying to hold on to the belief that this trade would actually work. You don't have to do this. Marco's voice stayed quiet. Careful. We can turn around, find another way. There is no other way. Elena stared out at the city passing by. This is the only play that saves anyone. You're walking into a nightmare. I know. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. But it's my nightmare. My choice. Better than sitting safe while everyone else dies. Marco was quiet for a moment. Then, for what it's worth, you're braver than most soldiers I know. Mr. Valenti's going to lose his mind when he finds out what you did. Only if he lives long enough to be angry. Elena touched the pendant at her throat, panic button her father had given her. She pressed it twice. Activation signal. If anything happened, if this went wrong, at least they'd know where to find her body. They pulled up in front of Celia's, a small Italian restaurant with dark windows and a closed sign. Dmitry had chosen well, isolated, easy to control, perfect ambush location. Elena reached for the door handle, but Marco caught her arm. Wait, let me check. The restaurant door opened. Dmitry Konstantin stood there with 4 armed men. Tall, heavy-built, face like a war crime. He gestured for Elena to approach. Alone, his voice carried across the street. Driver stays in the car, or everyone in the warehouse dies right now. Elena pulled free of Marco's grip. Stay here. If I'm not back in an hour, tell Nico I'm sorry. Elena, but she was already walking toward the restaurant, toward Dmitry, toward whatever came next. The armed men surrounded her immediately, patting her down with rough efficiency. Found her phone, smashed it underfoot, found the pendant, ripped it from her throat, and tossed it into the gutter. Clean. One of them reported to Dmitry. Good. Dmitry grabbed Elena's arm, pulled her into the restaurant. Let's go talk about what happens to girls who help their fathers set traps. The door slammed shut behind her. Through the window, she saw Marco start to get out of the car, but stop when one of Dmitry's men pointed a rifle at him. Then Dmitry dragged her deeper into the restaurant, away from windows, away from witnesses, into darkness and the unknown. Elena's last thought before everything went wrong was that at least she'd made the choice herself. At least she'd traded her safety for something that mattered. At least she'd finally stopped being managed. The restaurant's back room smelled like old grease and violence waiting to happen. Dmitry shoved Elena into a chair with enough force to crack her teeth together, then circled her like a predator evaluating prey. His men positioned themselves at the exits, 2 at the door, 1 by the kitchen entrance, 1 by what looked like a loading bay, all armed, all watching her with the casual interest of people who'd done terrible things and slept fine afterward. So, Dmitry pulled up a chair, sat backwards on it, arms crossed over the back. Elena Caruso, the daughter who thought she could play spy. How'd that work out for you? Elena kept her face blank despite her racing heart. You got what you wanted. I'm here. Now, let my people go. Your people? Dmitry laughed, sharp, ugly sound. You really think you're one of them? Little girl playing dress-up in Daddy's empire? You're not family. You're leverage, currency, a thing with a price tag. Then you should honor your deal. You wanted me in exchange for them. I'm here. Make the call. I will. Eventually. He leaned forward. But first we're going to have a conversation. About loyalty. About consequences. About what happens to families who think they can set traps for the Konstantin brothers. Elena's stomach twisted, but she held his stare. The trap was for Gavin. You just happened to be the one stupid enough to partner with a traitor. The slap came fast, Dmitry's hand cracking across her face hard enough to snap her head sideways. Elena tasted blood, felt her cheek bloom with heat, but she didn't cry out. Careful with your mouth, little girl. Dmitry's voice went cold. I'm the only thing standing between you and my men. You want to stay intact? Show some respect. Elena worked her jaw, testing for damage. Nothing broken. Yet. Where's Gavin? Your fiancé? Dimitri's smile showed too many teeth. He's indisposed. Turns out he was more useful as bait than as partner. We've had him talking for hours, singing like a bird about your family's operations. Every secret you fed him at that lunch, he gave it all to us, helped us plan this whole beautiful trap. So Gavin was still alive, still selling them out. Elena filed that information away, trying to think strategically despite the fear crawling up her spine. If you've been planning this, why the trade? Why not just kill everyone in the warehouse? Because killing everyone makes enemies. Dimitri stood, started pacing. But taking you, keeping you alive while we negotiate terms with your father, that gives us leverage for the long game. The Caruso operation doesn't collapse. It transfers, under our management, with you as insurance policy. You think my father will negotiate while you're holding me hostage? I think your father will do anything to get his daughter back. Dimitri pulled out his phone. And if he won't? Well, there are other uses for pretty girls in our organization. Markets that pay well for undamaged merchandise. We're flexible. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing shipping manifests instead of human trafficking, made Elena's skin crawl. But she forced herself to stay focused, keep him talking, buy time, figure out an angle. The men in the warehouse, she pushed, are you letting them go or not? Depends on how cooperative you are. Dimitri made a call, spoke rapid Russian. Elena caught fragments, coordinates, something about transport, instructions to hold position. Then he switched to English. Tell Alexei to release the south sector. Let Caruso's people extract their wounded. The north sector and Valenti's team stay locked down until we're clear. He ended the call, smiled at Elena. See? I keep my word. Some of your people get to live. The rest? We'll see how negotiations go. That wasn't the deal. You said everyone walks. I said everyone lives. I'm letting some of them walk. The others are collateral until your father and I reach an understanding. Dimitri moved closer, touched her face where he'd struck her. You really thought I'd just let the head of the Valenti family walk away? Nico Valenti is worth 10 of you. He's the real prize here. Elena's chest constricted. You're using me to keep Nico trapped. Now you're catching on. Dimitri's thumb pressed against her split lip, making her wince. Here's what happens next. You're going to call your father, tell him you're fine, tell him to stand down, pull his people back, let us consolidate our position. You do that, you say exactly what I tell you to say, and maybe, I let Valenti live long enough to watch us destroy everything his family built. And if I refuse, then I have my men execute Valenti right now, put a bullet in his head and send you the video. Dimitri's voice stayed conversational, pleasant even. Then we move on to your father, then your uncle, then every single person in that warehouse. We kill them all and burn the building to cover evidence. Your choice, Elena, cooperate or watch everyone die. Elena tried to think through the fear, tried to find an angle, a strategy, anything that might shift the situation. But Dimitri had planned this perfectly. He had all the leverage, all the power. All she had was the certainty that whatever she said or did next would determine who lived and who died. Let me talk to Nico first. The words came out steadier than she felt. Proof of life. I need to know he's actually alive before I make any calls. Dimitri studied her face. You care about him, Valenti. I saw how you looked at each other at your engagement party. Little tragic romance happening right under everyone's noses. Elena's pulse jumped, but she kept her expression neutral. I want proof he's alive. That's standard negotiation protocol. You should understand that. Smart girl. Dimitri made another call. More Russian. Then he put the phone on speaker. Static. Gunfire in the background. Then Nico's voice, strained and rough. Yeah. I have something of yours. Dimitri smiled at Elena. Want to say hello? Nico? Elena leaned toward the phone. Are you hurt? Silence. Then, Elena, what the hell are you doing? Where are you? I'm fine. I'm at Celia's restaurant. I made a trade. Myself for everyone in the warehouse. Dimitri said he'd let people go if you made a trade. Nico's voice went dead calm, the kind of calm that came before violence. You traded yourself to the Constantines. I didn't have a choice. You were trapped. Dad was bleeding. Vincent said, I don't care what Vincent said. I gave explicit orders. You were supposed to stay protected, stay in the mansion, stay away from operational situations exactly like this one. People were dying. Elena's voice cracked. You were pinned down. The warehouse was on fire. What was I supposed to do? Just sit there while everyone... Yes, Nico cut her off. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. Because now, instead of one tactical problem, we've got a hostage situation with you as the primary target. You understand what you've done? You've given them exactly the leverage they needed. Dmitri laughed. Listen to him. So angry, so afraid for you. This is going to be easier than I thought. Constantine, Nico's voice could have cut glass. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you're going to accomplish by taking her, it won't work. You can't leverage someone against me who I don't care about. The words hit Elena like physical blows. She knew, intellectually knew, that Nico was trying to reduce her value as a hostage, trying to protect her by pretending she didn't matter. But hearing it still hurt. Bullshit! Dmitri moved closer to Elena, grabbed her hair, yanked her head back. You care. I can hear it in your voice. Every word you're saying is a lie, and we both know it. Elena gasped as Dmitri's grip tightened, pulling hard enough to bring tears to her eyes. Let her go. Nico's voice dropped to something lethal. Right now, Dmitri. Let her go, or I will spend the rest of your very short life making you regret ever hearing the name Caruso. There it is. Dmitri yanked harder, making Elena cry out. That's the sound of a man who cares very much. You want her back, Valenti? Here's the deal. You surrender. Walk out of that warehouse unarmed with your hands up. You do that, and I let the girl live. You refuse, and I hurt her in ways that'll make you wish you died in that building. Don't do it. Elena forced the words out despite the pain in her scalp. Nico, don't you dare surrender. I made this choice. I knew the risks. Don't trade yourself for... Dmitri backhanded her hard enough to knock her sideways in the chair. Elena's vision blurred, her ear ringing from the impact. Touch her again, and I'll kill you with my bare hands. Nico's voice had gone beyond anger into something cold and final. I will pull you apart piece by piece. I will make it last days. You hear me, Dmitri? You've just signed your death warrant. Big talk from a man trapped in a burning building. But Dmitri's hand had hesitated. Elena heard it in his voice, the first crack of uncertainty. Nico Valenti didn't make idle threats. Everyone knew that. I'm giving you one chance. Nico continued, each word precise, controlled. Let Elena walk out of that restaurant right now. Release her unharmed. Do that and I'll make your death quick when I come for you. Hurt her and quick goes off the table. You're in no position to make demands. But Dmitri stepped back from Elena. Small victory. I'm always in position to make demands. Nico's voice carried absolute certainty. You think this warehouse is your kill box? You think you've won because you managed to set a trap? You've just started a war you can't win. The Valenti family doesn't negotiate with people who take hostages. We eliminate them. Completely. Permanently. Every single person in your organization. Everyone you've ever done business with. Everyone who's ever helped you. We burn it all down and salt the earth where you stood. Dmitri laughed, but it sounded forced. You'll be dead before... An explosion rocked the building, close. Elena felt it through the floor, saw dust rain from the ceiling. Dmitri's men shouted, scrambled toward windows. What the hell was that? Dmitri grabbed his radio. That was my reinforcements arriving. Nico's voice carried grim satisfaction. Federal agents, actually. Turns out when you set up an obvious ambush, it triggers protocols. FBI's been watching this warehouse for the last hour. They were waiting for my signal. You're bluffing. But Dmitri moved to the window, looked out. His face went pale. Am I? Nico asked quietly. Check your exits, count the agents. Think about how this ends for you. Through the window, Elena saw lights. Lots of lights. Vehicles surrounding the block. Official vehicles. The kind that came with badges and jurisdiction, and the kind of backup that didn't disappear when things got complicated. You called the feds. Dmitri's voice went flat. You brought law enforcement into a family matter. I brought appropriate response to a hostage situation. Nico's tone stayed level. You made this about Elena. That changed everything. Made it personal instead of business. And I don't do business when it's personal. Dimitri's radio crackled. Voices shouting in Russian and English. Something about federal agents, about being surrounded, about needing extraction that wasn't coming. Your men in the warehouse are being taken into custody right now, Nico continued. Your escape routes are blocked. Your backup is scattered. In about 3 minutes, federal agents are going to breach that restaurant, and everyone inside who's holding a weapon is going to have a very bad night. You've got one play left, Dimitri. Release Elena. Surrender peacefully. Live to see trial. That's the only way you survive the next 5 minutes. Dimitri looked at Elena, at his men, at the lights outside. She watched him calculate. Watched him realize the trap he'd set had become his cage. This isn't over. He grabbed Elena by the arm, hauled her toward the kitchen. You think I'm just going to give up? Hand over my leverage? I've got tunnels, exit routes you don't know about. By the time your federal friends get in here, I'll be gone and I'll have her with me. He dragged Elena through the kitchen toward what looked like a basement access. His men followed, weapons ready, fear starting to show through their professional composure. The basement was concrete and shadows and the smell of old beer. Dimitri pulled Elena toward the far wall where a heavy door stood partially hidden behind stacked crates. Move those, he barked at his men. Get that door open. We're going underground. Elena realized with sinking horror that he was serious. Tunnels. Escape routes. The Constantines had planned for this contingency. And if Dimitri got her into those tunnels, the FBI wouldn't find them in time. She had to do something. Had to act. Couldn't just let herself be dragged into darkness. When Dimitri's grip loosened slightly as he watched his men work on the door, Elena made her move. She dropped her full weight suddenly, wrenching herself sideways and down. The unexpected motion broke his hold just enough for her to twist free. She ran. Not toward the stairs, that was blocked by Dimitri's men. Toward the deeper basement. Toward shadows and the slim hope of finding another exit. Get her! Dimitri's roar echoed off concrete walls. Elena crashed through the darkness, hands outstretched, searching for walls or doors, or anything that might provide cover. Behind her, heavy footsteps and shouting in Russian. Someone fired a weapon, deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet sparking off concrete somewhere too close. She found stairs. Narrow, metal, leading up. She took them 3 at a time, lungs burning, terror driving her forward. The stairs ended at a heavy door, locked. Elena slammed her shoulder against it, but it didn't budge. She looked back, saw flashlight beams cutting through darkness, heard Dimitri's men getting closer. She was trapped. No exit, no weapon, no way out. Then the door exploded inward. Not from her side, from the other side. Federal agents in tactical gear poured through, weapons raised, shouting commands. Down! Get down! Hands where we can see them! Elena dropped to the floor, hands over her head, making herself as small as possible while the agents flooded past her toward Dimitri's men. Gunfire erupted. Brief, intense, then silence broken only by shouting. Someone grabbed Elena's arm. She flinched, but the grip was gentle, professional. Ma'am, are you Elena Caruso? She looked up into the face of a woman in FBI tactical gear. Yes. You're safe now. Come with me. Let's get you out of here. The agent helped her up, guided her through the door into what looked like an adjacent building's basement. More agents, more secure perimeter, safety that felt surreal after the last 30 minutes of terror. They brought her upstairs into cold night air and chaos. The street was full of federal vehicles, local police, emergency response teams. The warehouse district had become a war zone, being systematically secured by people with badges and jurisdiction. Elena saw Marco standing next to one of the FBI command vehicles, talking urgently to someone in a suit. When he spotted her, relief flooded his face. Miss Caruso. He moved toward her, but the agent held up a hand. She needs medical evaluation first. Then we'll need her statement. I'm fine. Elena's voice came out rough. Where's my father? Where's Nico? Are they out? Are they safe? Ma'am, I need you to sit down and let the paramedics... Where are they? Elena pulled away from the agent. Someone tell me if they're alive. Elena. Her father's voice cut through the chaos. She turned and saw Antonio limping toward her, one arm in a makeshift sling, blood on his shirt, but alive. Very much alive. Elena ran to him, crashed into his chest despite his injuries. He wrapped his good arm around her, held her so tight she could barely breathe. "You're alive." She was crying now, couldn't stop. "You're okay. I thought, when the radio cut out, I thought, I'm fine, we're fine. We're—" Antonio pulled back, looked at her face. His expression darkened when he saw the bruises forming where Dmitri had hit her. "Who did this? Who touched you?" "Dmitri. But I'm okay. Dad, I'm okay. Where's Nico? Is he—" "Here." Nico's voice came from behind her. Elena spun around. Nico stood there looking like he'd been through a war, smoke-stained, blood on his jacket, exhaustion in every line of his body, but alive and whole and staring at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You called the FBI." Elena's voice shook. "You brought federal agents to a mob war." "I called appropriate backup when the situation required it." Nico moved closer. "And before you ask, yes, that's going to complicate things. Yes, people are going to be arrested. Yes, this is going to be a political nightmare. But you're alive, so I don't care." "Dmitri said you were trapped, said the building was on fire, said—" "Dmitri was buying time and trying to leverage you into compliance." Nico reached out, touched her face gently where bruises were forming. "He was never going to honor the deal. The moment you walked into that restaurant, his plan was to use you as permanent leverage against both our families." "But you got out. Everyone got out?" "Most of us." Nico's jaw tightened. "We lost 3 men, another 6 wounded. But it could have been worse. Would have been worse if the FBI hadn't arrived when they did." Antonio spoke up. "The feds have been watching the Constantines for months, building a RICO case. When Nico contacted them and offered cooperation in exchange for tactical support, they mobilized fast. Dmitri and Alexei are both in custody. Most of their organization's been rounded up. It's over." "What about Gavin?" Elena asked quietly. "Dmitri said he was still alive, said he'd been talking." Nico and Antonio exchanged a look. Antonio answered. "He's alive, in federal custody, singing like you wouldn't believe. Gave them everything, his conspiracy with the Constantines, the planned takeover, his role in setting up tonight's ambush. He's looking at 20 years minimum." 20 years? Elena should have felt something, satisfaction, maybe, or relief. Instead, she just felt hollow. The man she'd almost married was going to prison. The organization that had threatened her family was destroyed. And all it had cost was 3 lives, federal involvement in family business, and whatever political complications came from bringing law enforcement into mob conflicts. "I need to sit down." She said it to no one in particular. Nico guided her to the back of an ambulance. Paramedics swarmed immediately, checking her vitals, examining the bruises, asking questions about pain levels and whether she'd lost consciousness. Elena answered mechanically, while her mind tried to process everything that had happened. The trade, the restaurant, Dmitri's plans, the basement, the escape, the FBI, all of it compressed into maybe 40 minutes that felt like hours. Miss Caruso. An FBI agent in a suit approached, older, serious, the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "I'm Special Agent Williams. I need to get your statement about what happened tonight. Everything Dmitri Constantine said and did. It's crucial for our case." "Can it wait?" Nico's voice carried edge. "She's been through trauma. She needs medical attention and rest before—" "It's fine." Elena cut him off. "I can give you my statement now, while it's fresh, before I start forgetting details." Williams nodded. "I appreciate that. This way." She followed him to a mobile command center. Spent the next 2 hours walking through everything, the decision to trade herself, the restaurant, Dmitri's threats, his plans to use her as leverage, the basement escape attempt. Williams recorded everything, asked clarifying questions, built a comprehensive picture. When she finally emerged, exhausted and wrung out, dawn was starting to break over Chicago. The warehouse district was still crawling with federal agents, but the immediate chaos had settled into methodical evidence collection. Nico waited outside the command center. Your father went to the hospital, his arms broken in 2 places. He wanted to wait for you, but I told him you'd be fine. Will he be? Elena asked. Fine. Physically, yeah. Everything else? Nico's expression suggested complications. That's going to take time. The feds are going to want cooperation, information, access to operations. This doesn't end with Dimitri's arrest. You made a deal with them. I made a deal to save your life. Nico met her eyes. Everything else is negotiable. Elena studied his face, exhaustion and relief, and something else she couldn't quite name. You really brought federal agents into a family operation. You broke every rule, made enemies, complicated everything. For me, yes, and no hesitation, no regret. Why? She needed to hear him say it. We've barely had 3 conversations where you weren't pretending I didn't exist. Why risk everything for someone you've spent years avoiding? Nico was quiet for a moment. Then, because in that warehouse, when I heard you'd traded yourself, when I realized what you'd done, I understood something. All those years of distance? Of staying away because keeping you safe required making everyone think you didn't matter? Completely pointless, because you matter anyway. Whether I admit it or not, whether I allow it or not, you matter to me in ways that make tactical sense irrelevant. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. He touched her face again, careful of the bruises. Ask me again tomorrow, after we've both slept, after the adrenaline wears off, after we've figured out what happens next with the FBI and the family and all the complications we've just created. Ask me then, and I'll try to give you something better than you matter. Tomorrow. Elena leaned into his touch despite everything. You promise we'll have tomorrow? That this isn't just crisis emotion that disappears when things settle? I promise. Nico's thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm done staying away. Done pretending distance equals protection. Done lying to myself about what I want. He paused. If you still want it, still want this, after everything you've seen tonight, after watching what this world actually costs. Elena thought about the warehouse, about Dimitri's threats, about 3 men dead and 6 wounded and Gavin looking at 20 years, about her father's broken arm and her mother's chemical distance and the reality underneath the elegant surface she'd grown up on. I want it. She said it with certainty despite the exhaustion. I want you. I want choice. I want to be part of this world with eyes open instead of protected and ignorant. All of it. Even the parts that keep me awake at night. Then tomorrow we'll talk. Nico stepped back before the moment could become something neither of them was ready for yet. For now, let's get you home. Real home. Not a war room or a federal command center. Somewhere you can actually rest. He guided her to one of the few remaining Caruso vehicles. Marco drove while Elena sat in back with Nico beside her, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance. Professional. Appropriate. Even though the way he watched her suggested nothing about his thoughts was professional. The mansion looked different in dawn light. Less fortress, more monument. The security presence had tripled, her father's people mixing with what looked like federal protection detail. Complicated didn't begin to cover what the next few months would involve. Inside, Vincent met them in the foyer. Miss Caruso, thank God you're safe. Your father called from the hospital. He'll be back this afternoon. In the meantime, he wanted me to make sure you had everything you needed. I need sleep. Elena's voice came out flat. About 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Then coffee. Then maybe I'll be ready to deal with consequences. Understandable. Vincent nodded. Marco will be posted outside your room. Additional security on the floor. You're completely protected. Thank you. Elena started toward the stairs but stopped, looked back at Nico. You'll still be here? When I wake up? Where else would I be? He smiled slightly. We've got complications to navigate, deals to structure, a future to figure out. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, climbed the stairs on legs that felt like they might give out any second. Marco followed at a respectful distance. True to his word, he positioned himself outside her door when she finally reached her room. Inside, Elena stripped off clothes that smelled like fear and gun smoke, showered until the water ran cold and her skin hurt from scrubbing. put on soft pajamas, and crawled into bed just as the sun fully cleared the horizon. She was asleep before her head fully settled on the pillow, and dreamed of basements and Dimitri's hands and Nico's voice promising violence in her defense. When she woke 12 hours later to afternoon light, she found her father sitting in the chair by her window, arm in a proper cast now, cleaned up, looking older but present. "Dad," her voice came out scratchy. "You're supposed to be resting." "So are you." He smiled slightly. "We're both terrible at following medical advice." Elena sat up, accepted the water glass he offered. "How bad is it? The damage? The complications?" "Honestly, could be worse." Antonio settled back in the chair. "The FBI is being surprisingly reasonable. They got Dimitri, Alexei, and about 30 members of their organization. They're treating it as a win against organized crime. Our cooperation is buying us goodwill. For now." "For now," Elena echoed. "What happens when now ends?" "We negotiate. We find balance. We adapt to a world where law enforcement has more visibility into operations than we'd prefer." Her father's expression turned serious. "But we survive. That's what we do. We survive and we evolve." "And Gavin?" 25 years minimum. Federal prosecutors are piling on charges. Conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering. He'll die in prison. Antonio's voice carried no satisfaction, just finality. He made his choices. Now he lives with consequences. Elena nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for trading myself, for not following orders, for complicating everything." "Don't apologize for being brave." Her father reached out with his good hand, squeezed hers. "You saved lives last night. My life, Nico's, dozens of our people. Yes, you took a massive risk. Yes, you scared me half to death. But you also proved something I should have known years ago." "What's that?" "That you're not fragile, not decoration, not someone who needs to be locked away and protected from reality." Antonio's eyes shone. "You're a Caruso, which means when things get impossible, you don't break, you fight. And last night you fought harder and smarter than most of my soldiers. I'm proud of you." The words broke something open in Elena's chest. She pulled her father into a careful hug, mindful of his injuries, and let herself cry for the first time since before the restaurant. They sat together while the afternoon faded toward evening. And for the first time in years, Elena felt like she actually belonged in the world her father had built. 3 months passed like water finding new channels after a dam break. Slow reshaping of landscape into something unrecognizable from what came before. The Caruso mansion settled into a rhythm that balanced old power structures with new realities. Federal oversight became background noise. The FBI got their convictions. Dimitri and Alexei Konstantin each received life sentences, Gavin got 28 years, and a dozen associates went down with them. In exchange, Antonio's organization gained something unprecedented: legitimacy through cooperation without surrendering autonomy. Elena watched it all unfold from a position she'd never expected to occupy. Seated at the conference room table during strategy sessions, her input requested rather than her presence tolerated. Her father kept his promise about training. Vincent taught her to read financial statements that hid illegal operations in legitimate business structures. James walked her through logistics and supply chain management. Her uncle Michael, surprisingly, showed her the enforcement side, not the violence itself, but the strategic thinking that prevented violence from becoming necessary. And Nico. Nico taught her everything else. They'd started carefully. Conversations over coffee in the mansion's library, walks through the grounds, with Marco maintaining discreet distance, long phone calls late at night when neither could sleep and the weight of their respective empires felt crushing. He showed her his world piece by piece, not just the violence and power plays, but the complexity underneath. The neighborhood programs the Valenti organization funded, the families they protected, the delicate balance between being feared and being respected. "You can't just be strong," he'd told her one night while they stood on the mansion's terrace watching the city lights. "Strength without purpose becomes tyranny. People need to believe you'll use power to protect them, not just to control them. That's the difference between an empire that lasts and one that crumbles the moment you show weakness." Elena had studied his profile in the darkness. "Is that what you do?" Protect people? I try to. His voice had gone quiet. Doesn't always work. Sometimes protection requires violence. Sometimes the people you're protecting hate you for the methods you have to use. But it's better than the alternative, which is chaos, predators with no checks, organizations that don't care who gets hurt as long as profit flows. Nico had turned to face her. Your father built something that, for all its flaws, maintains order, keeps territories stable, prevents the kind of violence that spills into civilian populations. That's worth something, even if the methods are ugly. Now, 12 weeks after the warehouse, Elena understood what he meant. She'd seen the intelligence reports about the vacuum the Constantine brothers' arrest created. Other organizations moving in, testing boundaries, pushing for advantage. Her father and Nico spending 18-hour days managing conflicts before they escalated. The delicate diplomacy of criminal enterprise, where a wrong word could trigger bloodshed. She'd also seen the quieter work, the community programs, the jobs created through legitimate businesses, the families who owed their stability to Antonio's protection, however ethically complicated that protection might be. It was past midnight on a Thursday in late May when everything shifted. Elena was in the war room reviewing shipping manifests with James when Vincent burst in, tablet in hand, face drawn tight with concern. We've got a problem. He pulled up files on the main screen. Major problem. Someone's been leaking information again. New source. Different network than Gavin. This just came through on an intercepted communication. Elena moved closer to the screen. The document showed detailed intelligence about Caruso family operations. Current intelligence updated since the Constantine takedown. Warehouse locations, personnel rosters, financial structures, everything someone would need to plan another hostile action. When did this get intercepted? James demanded. 20 minutes ago. FBI caught it during routine surveillance of a known trafficking operation in Detroit. They flagged it for us immediately. Vincent scrolled through more documents. But here's the worst part. The leak includes information about Elena, her current security arrangements, her movements, her role in family operations. Elena's blood went cold. Someone's targeting me specifically? Looks that way. Vincent pulled up more files. The communication references you as Caruso's weak point, suggests using you for leverage exactly like the Constantines tried. Who sent it? Elena forced herself to think strategically, instead of giving in to fear. What's the source? We're still tracing that, but the recipient, Vincent highlighted a name. Marcus Chen, James's nephew. The room went silent. James looked like he'd been struck. That's impossible. Marcus is loyal. He's been with us for 6 years. He's been selling information for 3 months. Vincent's voice stayed professional, despite delivering devastating news. FBI's been watching him as part of their ongoing investigation. They didn't tell us because they wanted to see where it led. Now it's led here. James sat down heavily. My nephew, my sister's son. I vouched for him, brought him into the organization, trained him myself. Where is he now? Elena asked. Unknown. He went dark 2 hours ago. Didn't show up for his shift, not answering calls. We've got people looking, but... Vincent pulled up security footage. This is from his apartment 40 minutes ago. The video showed a young man Elena vaguely recognized. Late 20s, efficient movements, packing a bag with practiced speed. He looked scared, desperate, like someone who knew he'd been compromised and was running out of time. He knows we know. James's voice came out hollow. He's running. Running where? Elena studied the footage. What's his escape plan? Where would he go? We're tracking his known associates, possible safe houses, transportation options. Vincent worked his tablet. But if he's smart, he's already gone to ground somewhere we won't think to look. Elena's phone buzzed. Nico calling. She answered. You've heard? Vincent sent me the files. I'm 15 minutes away. Don't do anything until I get there. His voice carried urgency. Elena, if Marcus is desperate enough to run, he's desperate enough to try using you as bargaining chip with whoever he's been selling to. I want additional security on you immediately. Marco, and a full detail. No arguments. Already done. Elena looked at the door where Marco had appeared with 3 additional guards. But Nico, we need to find him fast. If he disappears into wind, we'll never know who he was working with or what they're planning. I know. I'm bringing resources, contacts, everything we've got. He paused. How are you holding up? I'm fine. Just tired of being someone's leverage plan. She kept her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Find him, before whoever he's working with decides to act on the intelligence he's provided. She ended the call and turned to James. Your nephew. What matters to him? What would he protect even if it meant exposing himself? James looked broken. I don't know anymore. I thought I knew him. Thought he believed in what we were building. Obviously, I was wrong about everything. No? Elena moved to sit beside him. Not everything. People don't betray organizations they've been part of for 6 years without reason. Something changed. Something pushed him. What happened 3 months ago that might have made him desperate enough to sell out? James thought for a moment. Then his face went pale. His sister. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in February. Experimental treatments. Not covered by insurance. Costs running into hundreds of thousands. And he came to you for help? Vincent asked. No. James shook his head. That's the thing. He never asked, never mentioned it. I only found out last week when his mother called me. I was planning to talk to him about it, offer family support, but I got busy with the Constantine fallout and he broke off. I never had the conversation. Elena's mind raced. So, 3 months ago, his sister gets a terminal diagnosis, needs expensive treatment. He doesn't ask family for help because maybe he's proud, maybe he's scared of seeming weak, maybe he just doesn't know how to ask. Someone approaches him, offers money in exchange for information. He tells himself it's just business intelligence, nothing that'll really hurt anyone. But the information requirements escalate. Now he's in too deep to get out. That's a lot of assumptions, Vincent pointed out. It's human nature. Elena stood up. Desperate people make desperate choices. We've all just spent 3 months learning that lesson. If Marcus is running, it's because he's terrified, not because he's committed to betraying us. What are you suggesting? James looked at her. I'm suggesting we find him before whoever he's working with does, and we give him a chance to explain. Elena pulled up the security footage again. Look at his face. That's not a man running towards something. That's someone running scared. If we can reach him, talk to him, maybe we can turn this around. Or maybe he's exactly what he looks like, a traitor who sold us out for money. Vincent's voice carried skepticism. We can't afford to be naive about this. I'm not being naive. I'm being strategic. Elena pulled up the intelligence files Marcus had leaked. Look at what he actually sold. Operational details, financial structures, security arrangements. It's all valuable information, but notice what's missing? She highlighted gaps in the data. No information about our federal cooperation. Nothing about FBI agreements or protected sources. No intelligence about ongoing investigations. If Marcus was fully committed to betraying us, he would have sold everything, but he held back the information that would have actually destroyed us. That suggests conflict, reluctance, someone who's trapped rather than committed. The room was quiet. Then Nico's voice came from the doorway. She's right. Everyone turned. Nico stood there with 2 of his own people, looking like he'd driven at illegal speeds to get here. He moved to the screen, studied the files with practiced efficiency. This intelligence package is incomplete, deliberately so. He pointed to specific gaps. Marcus gave them enough to look cooperative, but not enough to actually compromise core operations. That's the profile of someone buying time or looking for an exit strategy. So we find him. Antonio entered behind Nico, arms still in a cast but moving with purpose. We find him before his buyers do. We figure out what he needs, and we make a better offer. With respect, Antonio, that's a huge risk, Vincent protested. If he's turned, bringing him back in gives him access to everything again. And if he hasn't turned, if he's just desperate and scared and trying to save his sister, then abandoning him guarantees he becomes an actual enemy. Antonio's voice carried authority. I've built this organization on loyalty. That means loyalty runs both ways. We take care of our people, even when they make mistakes. Elena felt something warm settle in her chest. This was the version of her father's empire worth protecting. Not the violence or the control, but the principle underneath, taking care of people, maintaining loyalty, solving problems with strategy instead of just elimination. I have an idea where he might be, James spoke quietly. There's a cabin, up in Wisconsin. Belonged to my sister before she got sick. Remote. Off the grid. Marcus loved that place when he was a kid. If he's running scared and wants somewhere to think, he might go there. How long to get there? Nico asked. 3 hours, maybe less at this time of night. Then we go now. Elena said it before she could second-guess herself. Small team, non-threatening. We find him, we talk to him, we bring him home. Absolutely not. Antonio and Nico spoke simultaneously. Elena turned to face them. Absolutely yes. Marcus leaked information about me specifically, made me part of this situation. I have a right to be part of the solution. Plus, she looked at James. He knows you, trusts you, presumably, despite selling information. He doesn't know Nico, doesn't trust random soldiers. But me? I'm family, not enforcement, not a threat, just someone who wants to talk. That might be enough to get him to listen instead of run. She makes a valid point, James said reluctantly. Marcus always responded better to family than to authority. If we send soldiers, he'll see it as a hit squad. If Elena comes, it signals we want to talk, not punish. It also puts her in danger. Nico's voice went hard. If Marcus panics, if he's armed, if whoever he's working with has people watching him, then I'll have you and Marco and whoever else comes along to keep me safe. Elena cut him off. I'm not suggesting I go alone. I'm suggesting I be part of the team that goes. There's a difference. Nico looked at Antonio. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, her father nodded. Full security detail. Nico and Marco. 2 additional teams for perimeter. And Elena, his voice went stern. You stay behind protection at all times. You don't approach Marcus directly. You're there to talk, but only from a position of safety. Agreed? Agreed. Elena grabbed her jacket. Let's move before he decides Wisconsin isn't far enough. They took 3 vehicles. Nico drove the lead car with Elena and Marco. James followed in the second with 2 security personnel. The third car held backup team and tactical equipment nobody wanted to use, but everyone knew might be necessary. The drive north through darkness gave Elena too much time to think. About Marcus, desperate to save his sister. About Gavin, desperate for power. About all the ways desperation turned people into versions of themselves they'd never intended to become. You're quiet. Nico's voice broke through her thoughts. Thinking about choices. Elena watched the highway unreal in the headlights. How many wrong choices it takes before you can't find your way back to who you were? Depends on the choices. Nico's hand stayed steady on the wheel. Some mistakes you can come back from. Others define you permanently. The trick is knowing which is which before you make them. Which kind of mistake did Marcus make? We'll find out. Nico glanced at her. You really think he deserves a chance after selling information that could have gotten you killed? I think everyone deserves a chance to explain before we decide they're irredeemable. Elena met his eyes. Isn't that what you gave me? In that elevator, when you could have just let me run to Boston and walk into Gavin's trap? You gave me information, choice, a chance to make better decisions. I'm just trying to extend the same courtesy. That's different. How? You weren't the one betraying people. But Nico's voice had softened. Wasn't I? I was planning to abandon my family without warning, disappear into a new life while they dealt with consequences I helped create by being engaged to Gavin. Elena turned in her seat to face him better. You could have seen that as betrayal. Instead, you saw it as someone trying to survive an impossible situation. I'm asking you to consider that maybe Marcus deserves the same interpretation. They drove in silence for several miles. Then Nico said quietly, You're too good for this world. I'm exactly what this world made me, just like Marcus, just like everyone else trying to survive impossible choices. Elena settled back in her seat. The question is whether we're going to be an organization that destroys people when they struggle or one that helps them find better options. The cabin appeared just after 2 a.m., small structure set back in the woods, single light burning in a window. Marcus's car sat in the gravel driveway. He was here. And either he felt safe enough to turn on lights, or desperate enough not to care about being found. Nico killed the headlights a quarter-mile back. The team deployed with practiced silence. Perimeter security established positions. Marco moved ahead to scout approaches. Everything professional, efficient, designed to minimize risk while maximizing control. James and Nico approached the cabin's front door with Elena between them, Marco and two others flanking. The message was clear. We're here to talk, but we're not here unarmed. James knocked. Marcus, it's your uncle. I know you're in there. I know you're scared. I need you to open the door so we can talk about this. Silence. Then movement inside. The door opened a crack. Marcus stood there looking exactly like his security footage, scared, exhausted, holding a gun with shaking hands. Uncle James? His voice cracked. You shouldn't have come. You don't understand what I've gotten into, what they'll do if... We know what you've done. James kept his voice gentle. We know about the leaks, about the intelligence you've been selling. We know all of it, Marcus. That's why we're here, to help, not to hurt. You can't help. Marcus's gun hand trembled worse. They'll kill Sarah, my sister. They said if I don't deliver more intelligence, if I try to back out, they'll make sure she doesn't get treatment. He broke off. I didn't have a choice. I didn't know what else to do. Elena spoke before anyone could stop her. Yes, you did. You had the choice to ask your family for help. We would have paid for Sarah's treatment. All of it. No questions asked. That's what family does. Marcus's eyes found her. Miss Caruso, I'm sorry. The information about you, I never meant for them to, actually. I was just trying to buy time until I could figure out. I know. Elena took a careful step forward despite Marco's hand on her arm. I know you're scared. I know you made choices you're not proud of because you were desperate to save someone you love. I understand that better than you might think. But Marcus, pointing a gun at your uncle isn't going to solve this. Whoever you're working with, whatever threats they've made, we can handle it. Together. As a family. But only if you put down the weapon and talk to us. They'll kill her. Marcus's face crumpled. You don't understand who these people are. What they're capable of. We understand exactly who they are. Nico's voice carried absolute certainty. Because we've spent 3 months dismantling organizations just like them. The Constantines thought they could threaten the Caruso family. Use Elena as leverage. You know what happened to them? Marcus shook his head. Life sentences. Their entire operation destroyed. Everyone who worked with them either dead or in prison. Nico moved slowly forward. We did that in one night. So whoever you're working with, whoever's threatened your sister, they're not as powerful as they think. They're just people who made the mistake of moving against us. Give us names. Give us locations. Give us everything you have. We'll make sure Sarah gets treatment and your employers understand what happens when they threaten Caruso family members. That easy? Marcus's laugh came out broken. I just confess everything and you fix it? It won't be easy. Antonio's voice came from behind them. Elena turned to see her father approaching, cast and all, flanked by 2 more security personnel. You betrayed us, Marcus. Sold information that could have gotten people killed. There are consequences for that. But consequences don't have to mean destruction. They can mean restitution, making things right, proving loyalty moving forward. How? Marcus lowered the gun slightly. How do I make this right? You tell us everything. James stepped closer to his nephew. Everyone you've dealt with, every piece of information you sold, every communication you've had, complete transparency. Then you help us dismantle the organization you've been working with. You become our inside source to take them down. And after, Marcus's voice barely whispered, after they're gone and you don't need me anymore? After you work off your debt. Antonio's tone stayed firm. You spend the next 5 years doing exactly what we tell you. When we tell you, with 0 complaints. You prove you've learned from this mistake. You demonstrate loyalty worth maintaining. You do that, and eventually you're back to being trusted family. You don't, and the consequences become permanent. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. Elena saw the calculation in his eyes, the desperate hope warring with fear and shame. Finally, the gun lowered completely. Okay. He set the weapon on a nearby table. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Just please, please help Sarah. That's all I care about. Just help her. We will. James pulled his nephew into a tight hug. We'll handle Sarah's treatment, all of it. But Marcus, if you ever feel this desperate again, you come to me. You hear me? You don't sell out family. You ask family for help. That's how this works. They spent the next 3 hours in that cabin extracting every detail from Marcus. The organization he'd been selling to, a trafficking operation based in Detroit trying to expand into Chicago territory, the names of his contacts, the intelligence he'd provided, the threats they'd made. Everything laid out with the desperate thoroughness of someone who'd been carrying the weight alone too long. By the time dawn broke, they had enough to move. Nico made calls mobilizing resources. Antonio contacted federal agents who owed them favors. Within hours, coordinated raids hit the Detroit operation at every level. Leadership arrested, network disrupted, sources compromised. The kind of comprehensive takedown that happened when you combined criminal expertise with law enforcement legitimacy. Marcus's sister was moved to a protected medical facility by noon. Best oncologists, experimental treatments approved and funded, security detail ensuring no retaliation attempts. By evening, the threat that had pushed Marcus into betrayal had been neutralized completely. They returned to Chicago as the sun set, exhausted, wired on adrenaline and coffee, but intact. Marcus rode with James, quiet and subdued, processing the reality of consequences that involved redemption instead of execution. Elena watched them through the rear window and felt something shift in her understanding of what her father's empire could be at its best. Back at the mansion, she found Nico waiting in the library. He'd cleaned up, changed clothes, somehow managed to look less exhausted than everyone else despite running operations for 18 hours straight. "You did good today," he said when she entered. "With Marcus, the way you talked him down, that was impressive." "I just told him the truth." Elena collapsed into the chair across from him. "That desperation makes us do things we're not proud of. That asking for help is harder than it should be. That family means supporting each other through impossible situations." She met his eyes. "All things I've learned recently." "From me?" Nico's lips quirked slightly. "From everyone. From Dad letting me into the war room, from Vincent teaching me to read situations instead of just reacting, from watching you navigate between violence and protection." Elena leaned forward. "From understanding that this world isn't as simple as good and evil. It's people making impossible choices and trying to live with consequences. That's a very mature perspective. I've had 3 months of very accelerated education." She smiled tiredly. "So where does this leave us? We've eliminated threats, cleaned up messes, established new protocols. What happens now?" Nico was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to sit beside her instead of across, close enough to touch, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Now we figure out what we're building." His voice dropped lower. "Not just strategically, not just operationally, but personally, you and me. What we are to each other when we're not managing crises." "What do you want us to be?" Elena asked. "Partners?" He said it with certainty. "Equals. 2 people building something better than what we inherited. You've proven over the last 3 months that you can handle this world, that you're not someone who needs protecting from reality. You're someone who makes reality better by being part of it." "That's very diplomatic." Elena studied his face. "But it doesn't answer the actual question. Do you want me, Nico? Not as ally or asset or strategic partner, as a person, as a woman, as someone you're willing to build a life with despite all the complications?" "Yes." No hesitation. "I want you in ways that make tactical sense completely irrelevant. I want you when you're strong and when you're struggling. I want you making decisions beside me and challenging me when I'm wrong. I want mornings and midnights and everything in between. I want—" He reached out, cupped her face gently. "I want to stop pretending distance protects either of us and start admitting that you're the thing I'm most afraid of losing." Elena's breath caught. "I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Promise." She leaned into his touch. "I chose this world, chose you, chose to stay and build something instead of run. That doesn't change just because the immediate crisis is over." Nico kissed her then, finally. Months of distance and denial collapsing into something real and present and overwhelming. Elena kissed him back with everything she had, relief and want, and the certainty that this was exactly where she was supposed to be. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nico rested his forehead against hers. Your father's going to have opinions about this. My father already has opinions about this. Antonio's voice came from the doorway. Question is whether you're planning to make an honest woman of my daughter, or if I need to have concerns about your intentions. Elena turned to see her father standing there, trying to look stern, but failing to completely hide his smile. Dad, how long have you been standing there? Long enough to confirm what I've suspected for months. Antonio moved into the library. Nico Valenti, heir to the Valenti Empire, in love with my daughter, took you long enough to admit it. With respect, Antonio, I was trying to keep her safe. Nico stood, putting himself between Elena and her father, despite the absurdity of the gesture. By staying away and making everyone think she didn't matter? Antonio laughed. That worked brilliantly, right up until she traded herself to the Constantines to save your life. You think that's the action of someone who doesn't matter to you? It's the action of someone who matters more than she should. Nico's jaw clenched. Which is why we need to have a conversation about what happens next, about making this official, about asking my permission to propose? Antonio's voice carried amusement. Nico, you've been part of this family and everything but name for years. You've fought beside us, bled for us, called in federal favors to save my daughter's life. You think I'm going to object to you making it official? I think you might have opinions about timeline. Nico looked at Elena. We've only been openly together for a few hours. You've been orbiting each other for 3 years. Antonio corrected. The last 3 months just made it impossible to keep pretending. So here's my opinion, since you're asking. You want my daughter? You want to build a life with her? You better be planning to treat her as an equal partner in everything. Not just personally, but professionally. She's earned a real seat at the table, a real voice in decision-making, a real role in operations. You give her that, respect that, support that, and I'll give you my blessing. You try to turn her into decoration or leverage or anything less than she's proven herself to be, and we'll have problems. Nico looked at Elena. What do you want? I want what you offered. Elena stood, moved to stand beside him. Partnership, equality, a seat at the table and a voice in decisions. I want to keep building what we've started, turning this empire into something that protects people instead of just controlling them. I want, she took a breath, I want you to ask me properly, not in a crisis, not because it's strategic, because you actually want to build a life together. Now? Nico's voice carried surprise. Now seems perfect, actually. Elena smiled. We've survived impossible situations, proved we work well together, established that we want the same things. Why wait? Nico looked at Antonio. You're really okay with this? Right now? After everything that's happened? Son, I'm dying to see you try to propose without a ring, without planning, in my library with me as witness. Antonio's smile turned genuine. So please, proceed. This should be entertaining. Nico laughed. Real surprise sound that Elena had never heard from him before. Then he turned to her, took both her hands, and met her eyes with absolute certainty. Elena Caruso. 3 years ago I saw you at a family dinner and realized you were dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with violence or power. You were dangerous because you made me want things I'd trained myself not to need. Connection. Partnership. Someone who saw past the reputation to the person underneath. I've spent 3 years trying to protect you by staying away. The last 3 months proving that protecting you means standing beside you instead. You're brave and brilliant and strategic in ways that constantly surprise me. You challenge me to be better, make me want to build something worth the trouble we're going to face. So here's my question, without ring or planning or anything except honest intention. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything? Will you help me turn our family's empires into something we can be proud of instead of just something we survive? Elena felt tears on her face. Happy ones for once. Yes, to all of it. Yes. He kissed her again, softer this time. Sweet instead of desperate. A promise instead of a claim. Antonio cleared his throat. Congratulations. Now, about timeline. I'm thinking we should wait at least 6 months before making any public announcements. Let things settle after the Constantine situation. Make sure the FBI cooperation is stable. Then we can... Dad. Elena cut him off gently. I love you. I appreciate your input. But this is our decision. Ours. We'll figure out timeline and announcements and all the political complications. You don't have to manage this for us. Antonio blinked, then smiled. You're right. I'm sorry. Old habits. Trying to control situations that don't need controlling. He moved forward, pulled Elena into a careful hug. I'm happy for you, sweetheart. Truly. Nico's a good man. You'll build something remarkable together. We will. Elena hugged him back. All of us. As a family. Turning what you built into something even better. The next 6 months proved that optimism wasn't entirely misplaced. The Caruso and Valenti organizations formalized their alliance through strategic mergers that gave both families stronger positions. Elena took on official role as operations advisor, less violent than enforcement, more strategic than administration, perfectly suited to her skill set. She negotiated deals, managed conflicts, built relationships with allies and competitors alike. She and Nico announced their engagement in September at a carefully staged family dinner that became news in both legitimate society pages and less legitimate intelligence networks. The message was clear. The next generation was taking over, and they were doing things differently. They married in November. Small ceremony, close family only. No political theater, no business negotiations, just two people making promises they intended to keep. Elena wore cream silk instead of white. Nico wore a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but looked good enough to justify it. Antonio walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Catherine actually smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in years. The reception was bigger. 300 guests mixing legitimate business contacts with less legitimate associates. Federal agents who'd helped take down the Constantines drinking with reform mob soldiers trying to build cleaner operations. The kind of complicated mixing that represented the world Elena and Nico were building. Not clean, not simple, but trying to be better than what came before. 6 weeks after the wedding, a new crisis emerged. Smaller than the Constantine situation, but significant enough to require immediate attention. A territorial dispute with an organization moving in from the East Coast. Threats of violence if boundaries weren't redrawn. Elena sat in the war room reviewing intelligence with Nico, Vincent, and James. Her father attended remotely. He'd been reducing his active involvement, transitioning leadership to the next generation, learning to trust instead of control. We have 3 options. Elena outlined them on the screen. Negotiate a territorial compromise, demonstrate strength through strategic enforcement, or bring in federal mediation before this escalates to violence. Federal mediation sets bad precedent, Vincent argued. Makes us look weak. It makes us look smart, Elena countered. We've spent 6 months building relationships with law enforcement that give us legitimacy our competitors don't have. We use those relationships, we solve this without bloodshed, and we send a message that we're not the same kind of organization we used to be. What if they interpret that as weakness and push harder? James asked. Then we escalate appropriately. Nico pulled up tactical options. But Elena's right. We try the smart play first, save violence for when negotiation fails. That's the model we're building. They voted. Negotiation won. Elena made the calls, arranged the meeting, brought federal mediators who could enforce agreements with legal consequences instead of just threats. The territorial dispute got resolved in 3 days with 0 casualties and a compromise that actually strengthened both organizations. Word spread. Other families started requesting Elena specifically for conflict mediation. She became known not as the daughter who needed protection, but as the strategist who prevented wars. A year after the Constantine warehouse, Elena stood in the war room alone late at night, reviewing reports and thinking about how much had changed. She'd gone from planning escape to Boston to being an integral part of her family's evolution. From being managed to managing. from being protected to protecting others. Nico found her there past midnight. You should be sleeping. So should you. She smiled as he moved behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. Just thinking about how different everything is. A year ago I was trying to run. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Any regrets? He kissed her temple. About staying? About choosing this life? About marrying you? Elena turned in his arms. Not even slightly. You? Only that I wasted 3 years staying away when I could have been building this with you from the start. Nico's expression went serious. There's something I wanted to talk to you about. Been thinking about it for a few weeks. Okay. Elena studied his face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right, but it's going to complicate things. He took a breath. Your father wants to retire, fully retire. Hand over operational control to the next generation. He's asking if we're ready to take over the Caruso organization, merge it completely with Valenti operations, build something new from both families. Elena processed that. What did you tell him? That I needed to talk to you first, because this isn't my decision alone. It's ours. Together. Equal partnership like we promised. Nico searched her face. So what do you think? Are we ready? Do you want this? Elena looked around the war room, thought about everything it represented, the violence and power and complexity, the protection and strategy and careful balance between being feared and being respected, the responsibility of managing an empire that employed thousands and controlled territory across multiple states. I think we're as ready as we'll ever be, she said finally. I think we've proven we can handle crises and build alliances and make hard choices. I think combining the families under unified leadership could make us stronger, more stable, better able to accomplish the reforms we've been talking about. It won't be easy, Nico warned. There will be resistance, challenges, people who think we're too young or too idealistic or too willing to compromise with authorities. When has anything about this life been easy? Elena smiled. We'll handle resistance the same way we've handled everything else. Together. With strategy and strength and the willingness to fight for what we're building. Nico kissed her, deep and certain and full of promise. Then let's do it. Let's build an empire worth being proud of. They told Antonio the next morning. He smiled with relief and something that might have been pride. Announced his retirement at a family gathering that week. Formally transferred leadership to Elena and Nico with his blessing and support. The transition took months, restructuring operations, combining resources, managing personnel who'd served 2 separate families and now had to work as one unified organization. Elena and Nico spent 18-hour days navigating politics and logistics and the 1,000 small complications of merging empires. But slowly, it worked. The Caruso Valenti organization became known for being different, tougher on internal corruption, more willing to cooperate with authorities when cooperation served everyone's interests, strategic instead of reflexively violent. They cleaned up operations that had become too dirty, shut down trafficking networks that had operated in their territory, built legitimate businesses that employed people who might otherwise turn to criminal enterprise. It wasn't perfect. They still made hard choices, still operated in moral gray areas, still had to authorize violence when negotiation failed, but they did it with clear principles and genuine attempts at minimizing harm. 2 years after taking over, Elena sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports when Nico entered looking pleased. Good news, the federal prosecutor we've been working with just shut down that trafficking operation in Milwaukee, completely dismantled, 42 arrests, all without any blowback on us. Because we gave them intelligence. Elena smiled. See? Cooperation works. It also makes us look soft to some of our more traditional associates. Nico settled into the chair across from her desk. We got another complaint from the Detroit family about our unconventional methods. Let them complain. Elena set down her tablet. We're building something sustainable, something that can survive federal scrutiny and public visibility, something our children won't have to be ashamed of. Nico went very still. Children? Elena realized what she'd said, felt her face heat. I mean, hypothetically, eventually, if that's something you want. Is it something you want? His voice stayed carefully neutral. Maybe. She met his eyes. Not immediately. Not while we're still consolidating power and managing transitions. But someday? Yes, I think I'd like to raise children in the world we're building. Show them it's possible to be strong without being cruel, powerful without being destructive. Nico came around the desk, pulled her to her feet, held her close. Someday sounds perfect. First we finish building the empire. Then we fill it with people worth building it for. You're very strategic about everything, aren't you? Elena laughed against his chest. I learned from the best. He kissed the top of her head. Speaking of which, your father called. Wants to have dinner this weekend. Said he has something important to discuss. They had dinner at the mansion Saturday night. Antonio looked healthier than Elena had seen him in years. Retirement agreeing with him, the weight of constant crisis management lifted from his shoulders. Catherine was there too, more present than usual, medication adjusted to something that let her actually engage with reality instead of just drifting through it. Over dessert, Antonio cleared his throat. I wanted you all here because I have an announcement. Your mother and I are selling the mansion, moving somewhere quieter. Maybe the coast. Somewhere we can actually enjoy retirement instead of just existing in the space where we used to work. Elena blinked. You're leaving Chicago? We're leaving the life, Antonio corrected gently. You and Nico have built something new, something better. It's yours now, completely. We're just going to be proud parents watching from a distance instead of shadows you have to work around. Catherine spoke quietly. I think it's time I actually lived instead of just surviving. Your father agrees. We want to travel, see things. Be people instead of just roles we've played for too long. Elena felt tears threaten. I'm happy for you, both of you. You deserve peace. We do. Antonio reached across the table, took her hand. And so do you. You've earned everything you've built. The respect, the power, the partnership with Nico. You've taken an empire built on violence and fear and transformed it into something that could actually do good in the world. I'm more proud of you than I have words for. The mansion sold within a month. Elena and Nico bought a place of their own, modern penthouse in the Loop with enough security to satisfy Marco and enough windows to let in light. They filled it with art and books and the life they were building together. 3 years after the Constantine warehouse, Elena sat on their terrace watching the sunset paint Chicago in gold and crimson. Nico joined her with wine, settling into the chair beside her. Productive day? He asked. Very. Closed the deal with the West Coast Alliance, negotiated new terms with our federal contacts, managed to prevent what could have been a nasty territorial conflict through aggressive mediation. Elena accepted the wine glass. You? Similar. Also got word that Marcus's sister is officially in remission, 5 years cancer-free. He wanted me to thank you for the family support. He earned it, Elena smiled. Spent 3 years proving loyalty and competence. That's worth supporting. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city they protected and profited from and occasionally saved from itself. Elena thought about the elevator 3 years ago, about Nico admitting he'd stayed away because she made him lose control, about choosing to stay instead of run, best choice she'd ever made. I love you. She said it simply, without drama, just truth. I love you too. Nico took her hand. Thank you for staying, for building this with me, for making it possible to have power and principles instead of having to choose. Thank you for letting me. Elena squeezed his fingers. For seeing me as partner instead of liability, for trusting me with the hard parts instead of trying to protect me from reality. They watched the sun disappear below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of ending and beginning. And Elena knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. Not in Boston running from complexity, but here, in Chicago, building an empire worth the wait, with the man who'd finally stopped pretending distance meant safety, together, equal, unafraid. The future spread ahead of them like their city, complicated, beautiful, theirs to shape, and they intended to make it remarkable.